Hey everyone, welcome back to Professor's Play, the show where you can get just a pixel of deep thinking with your mostly nonsensical video game discussions. I am Professor Phil Chavot, he's Professor John Adams, and he's Professor Brendan West, and together we are professors who play video games, as you know by now, avid fans.
All three.
I'm not even going to refute that. This week, we have our third episode on the Persona 4 Golden series, so that we are going to provide the full review of the game. So, spoilers for a 15/11-year-old game. I think we're in pretty safe territory regarding spoilers.
Nice.
Yeah. So we have a lot to discuss today, so we're going to get right into it. But I guess before we start, I'm going to do the usual and ask John how he is.
Thank you. I was really worried you might forget it. I'm really angry today.
It's great.
Emotionally invested in this game because this game is full of lies and deceit.
I think John's final score is colored by his current emotional state. We'll get to that later. Brendan, how are you?
I'm here.
He's here. Not that you guys never asked me, but I'm good as well. Thank you.
We don't care.
This is a very supportive environment. So before we start talking about, because we're gonna go over the story of Persona 4 Golden, since it's literally a year in several people's lives. Right, so
before
happens.
the recording starts, Phil's like, I'm the host, I'm in charge, I ask the questions, and then here he's like, oh, you guys never asked me how I'm doing.
The minute we all ask each other how we're doing and answer, you see a our social link increases. A little bit. That's why
we just
force it
increase
every
our
time.
social links. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a Persona 4 Golden joke right there. Every time you talk to someone, you get a little closer to them, and there's a voice in your mind that says, you just got closer to them.
Which card comes down, though? Is this full Arcana?
For us, definitely the Fool.
Full Arcana.
Yeah.
My plan is to make Phil a romantic partner by the end of the year.
I mean, that's something we can talk about Persona 4 Golden, no same-sex relationships, right? And that's something that,
that is
people
That is
call
true.
for in all Persona games. So maybe Persona 6 will have it. Persona 5 didn't. Persona 3 at least had a female main character you could play as, but then you couldn't romance the women there. You could romance the guys. And there's some extra stuff like in Persona 3, as a guy, you can go to the flower shop and buy girls' flowers. If you're the female main character, the flower shop doesn't let you walk in.
What?
Yeah.
What?
It just says it's a beautiful flower shop. Then you have to walk away, and that's it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild.
What if I wanna buy
Yeah,
myself flowers?
there's rumor, and I've read about this. Data miners have found that there is dialogue left in the game. I think Persona 4. I think of a potential romantic route with Yosuke, who's your best friend in the game.
Oh, interesting.
But never made it the final cut. Don't remember if this is a rumor or someone created something that looks super realistic, so people thought it was data mined.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a market for it, so we'll see what happens here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna talk about the story a little bit. But first, I want to see how far we got, and then your in-game goal if you achieved it, right? So let's go. Let's start with Brandon.
So I got one of the good endings.
Proud of you, man.
I did better than John did.
Brandon finished this game.
Brandon finished this game, and that
finished
does
this
deserve
game.
a round of applause.
I was
Amazing.
also the first one to finish this game. I texted these guys.
That's
I'm
true.
like, all right, I'm finished.
You were the first one because for a week I was in Toronto and stuff, so I didn't play.
It only took the last episode of Professor's Play for the year.
Yeah,
For Brandon
for
to
the year,
finish
for the
game.
season.
For the season.
That's a spoiler, by the way. I was going to say that at the end, but thanks, John.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we will be taking a hiatus after this.
Yes.
Details
Hiatus, though.
to come.
Not
Hiatus.
forever. Yeah.
We'll be back. We shall return. So yeah, I got one of the good endings. I fought the sort of optional, real big bad behind everything, pulling all the strings.
Not optional.
Yeah. So sorry.
Yeah.
Optional if you mess up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was it.
I guess there's an optional boss, and it's not that one.
Yeah. And I did not get there,
Yeah.
and I did not get the true ending, which I knew I wasn't gonna get because there was one character I could never.
No, you got the
find.
true ending. You didn't get the. Actually, you did get the true ending, which we'll talk about. You didn't get the golden
The
ending.
golden ending.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the
okay,
ending you
fair,
got
fair,
is the
fair.
best ending possible in Persona 4. Persona
Oh,
4
I see.
Golden, there's a step further.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't get the epilogue at all.
Yes.
John.
So I was playing, answering questions like a normal person would answer questions, right? And
that's
not
your
looking
first
up,
mistake.
not looking
Yeah,
up,
exactly.
and not cheating. And there
It
comes
is not cheating. We never said we couldn't do that.
That's fair. Not breaking my own code. living up to my own standards.
Samurai.
Yeah, living a Bushido sort of lifestyle over here. And there comes a moment in the hospital in December when you are asked what you should do next. And at first they're like, well, I think this murder guy did it. And you say, something doesn't feel right. And they say, oh, that's true, that is true. Well, then maybe we should continue to investigate and let the police handle this for now. And you can say, okay, we'll continue to investigate and let the police handle it. That is the wrong answer. What I should have chosen...
Actually, hold on. Let me ask you this. How did you know that was the wrong answer?
Because immediately after that, we skipped 3 months with 0 warning. Now, admittedly, because of something I did earlier, good things did happen. Nanako came back to life.
Yeah.
But it immediately skips 3 months. The fog is still in Inaba. You board a train and wave a sad goodbye to all of your friends.
And I think there's something to say here about like how the game, without saying anything like that was bad, you're like, oh man, that was bad.
I got the bad ending.
Yeah.
I text Brandon and Phil. I was like, I didn't mean to. I got the bad ending, and I was like, but I guess that's where it's gonna go. At the time I was like, I really thought that it was gonna continue because I didn't think this guy was the bad guy, and I said that to them, but it didn't matter, and then it just ended up bad. So I must have done something worse. And at the time, I actually thought that the right option was to throw him into a TV set and kill him.
It is.
Yeah, hold on. We're getting into a lot of details here. So you got the bad ending, then you went back and you played, then you got one of the normal endings.
Then you convinced me. You were like, go back, play it again. I was like, well, that would be against the Bushido way. And you're like, well, the Bushido way is over now. You finished the quest, and you've died a noble samurai. So go back and play. I was like, all right, I did. So then I started working through the dialogue options because they are not clear at all.
No.
And it took me 6 times
Yes.
to get through that scene to move on with the game with the right options. And in order to do that, listener, you have to choose the option something doesn't feel right 3 separate times.
Yeah.
With people basically saying the same thing.
Okay.
In response.
I have all this stuff here, and I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
But what I want to hear is like, and then you went back and you played until you got you got the true ending, Brandon. I'm pointing at Brandon. John,
right.
you got a good ending because then you beat.
Then I beat like the boss.
Kuno Sagiri or whatever he's called.
Kuno Sagiri.
Yeah.
And then he
Which
dies.
is the god of the bringing the fog into town.
And then you have an option to be like, all right, well, let's go home and relax now. And I did that.
And you picked that.
And I should have picked...
That's the wrong answer also.
I should have picked something like, this was an interesting experience, and I would have gotten a nonsense extra answer.
Yeah, so John got the good ending, which is you get to the last day of the year. Well, John, first he got a bad ending. But then he got the good ending, which when you get to the last day of the year, they ask you, like, what do you want to do? And if you say, I just want to go home, good ending.
Good ending.
Right? Brandon got the true ending, which is when they ask, like, do you want to go home? You say no, you do a bunch of stuff. You fight the true final boss. And I got the epilogue ending, which is not only do you do all the things that John said before of picking all the right answers and do all the things that Brandon talked about, but then you also have to max out a social link, so a connection with a specific character before. I read 2 different dates, December 3rd and December 31st. So essentially before the end of the main plot, you have to max out that character.
Is it Marie?
It's Marie,
It's Marie.
to get to the golden ending.
Yeah.
Which is an epilogue, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit, because if that was a little bit of nonsense, I apologize. I was trying to talk about how far we got to justify how we're going to tell the story, but let's just tell the story at this point. So, John, tell us what happens, just things that happen until the game starts on in late April, and then you get to December and you have the decision to push Namatame, who you think is the criminal, or maybe you don't, but your friends do,
or
into
you
the TV.
Don't think that.
You don't think that.
Yeah. So I will share
So
with
what was
you
happening?
now.
Why did you get to this point? Why is Namatame in the hospital?
Yeah, I will share with you
Give us
this
a
whole thing
synopsis.
so that you know my rage here. So you were trying to find out who this criminal is the whole time, and at the very end,
What is the criminal doing?
The criminal is shoving people into TVs, and they fall into these TVs. They have an incredible experience with their alter ego, and their alter ego kills them. Right? They're
Most of the
shadow.
time, yeah.
Most of the time,
Unless you save them.
unless you save them.
Yeah.
And so you go around saving these people that have been shoved into TVs, and one of the recurring questions is who is shoving people into TVs?
And how they're getting to them.
And how are they doing this? Because they're able to get all over town and nobody's reported anything and there's no issues, right? Nobody seems surprised or worried when these random people show up at their door. We'll get to my first thoughts on who that would have been earlier. But
No, you can talk about it now.
Okay.
Full spoilers, yeah.
all spoilers. So we're going around, they're saying this. And early on in the game, last episode, I think it's recorded. I think I said
it's
this.
recorded.
Okay.
It was super fun to like
validated.
It was super fun to like knock you off it.
I was
with
like,
just one thing.
I was like, all right, I think it's one of the detectives because there are only 3 new people in this town. One person who is dead currently, the reporter, me, and this new detective Adachi. And not only that, but he has soulless eyes that match the eyes of the person we thought was the killer earlier in the game. And not only that, he's so criminally incompetent that he's either working against this or he's incompetent. And then people were like, no, it's not him.
No, I didn't say it's not him. To be clear, I did not say it's... You can check the tape, because I did. It's not him. I said, and I stand by this, because it's true, I said he didn't... Because you said he moved into town the same time you did. And I was like, no, he didn't. He's been there for a few months.
Oh, that's what it was.
And you're like, oh, then never mind. And
Never
I was
mind.
like, oh, that was easy.
Oh, goodness.
And in my head, I had already formulated like other things. Like, well, I mean, he's just like Wheatley, he's just bad at his job, kind of thing. And
Phil is evil, but it's not just Phil. It is all of your friends in the game as well.
Out there, listener, you're probably thinking like, if I had a real friend and I was about to spoil myself, I would like them to not let me do that.
It was cooler not knowing and going into that. So I do thank Phil, ultimately. The people who I don't thank are my friends in the murder case, who we would gather at the mall every day and they would say, John, who do you think is murdering these people? And I was like, well, it seems like somebody on the police force is doing it. And they'd be like, that's nonsense. Police people are good people. And I'm like, have you lived in America?
And they're like,
Okay.
no.
Well, no, they haven't.
And they're like, no. Yeah.
I was like, there's
They're like,
definitely
no,
a
I'm
possibility.
13 in a tiny town in Japan. Yeah.
So we ignore this the whole time, and I eventually get gaslit out of this thing, and we find out that who else could be visiting houses? Maybe a delivery man. And so a
Because you
delivery
see
man.
him too in the little concert. Did you guys notice this? He's in the background of the concert, and he walks away.
I did not
when
notice
you're
that.
like when you're you and your friends are like, because you, of course, this is an anime, right? So there's a concert arc, and you give a show at the local Walmart, right? Junes, and at the back of like when you 9 of you are in the back like getting ready to go on stage, and there's a delivery person in the back, and he walks through. And it's because he says, I wanted to talk to you guys about why you guys are hanging out together since I saved all of you, because he thinks he was saving people, but he didn't have the strength to do it. So like you start getting these hints.
Oh, that's
sprinkled
cool.
in. Yeah.
So
And you can also talk to him in town. Like he just like walks around
there?
sometimes, and you can like talk to him, and he talks about how like he thinks some things he says are normal, like I'm getting back to my life, and some things he says like I found a new purpose in my life, and you're like, oh,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. There's all kinds of little details. This is a really careful game.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, eventually they say, invite you to the delivery man, and then you go and you end up in a high-speed chase with your uncle, father, and this guy, and you chase him down in the truck and knock him down, and you find out that he has been throwing people into the TV to try to save them, but somebody must have told him that he was saving people, and it doesn't account for like the first 2 murders, right? So you know something's fishy, and in the hospital...
So he thinks he's saving them because he sees them on the TV.
Yep.
Like, because there's this whole Midnight Channel thing, right? So you see the people on the TV. The TV is the collective unconscious. People think about that person. They then appear on TV. And this guy, Namatame, thinks that if you appear on this Midnight Channel TV, it means you're going to die in real life.
Right.
Because it happened twice.
Because it happened twice. And both times it's like, saw them, died the next day. Saw them, died the next day. So he thinks that whenever he sees someone on TV, he needs to save them, and the way he saves them is by throwing them into the TV because he doesn't understand how the TV works.
Right.
However, you don't know this. You assume that he knows how the TV works, and he's throwing them in to kill them. But he's trying to do the opposite.
He's trying to do the opposite. And so you know something's off, right? And so you have these dialogue options in the hospital where you're like, I know something's off. And your friends, you say,
Okay.
That's strange. Interesting.
I have the full scene.
Oh,
here,
read the
okay?
dialogue, please.
So here's what
people
happens.
know
okay?
I'm not crazy.
So once you figure out that this guy, like, because when you actually get to him, he's like losing his mind. He doesn't understand why what he's doing is bad because he genuinely thinks that he's saving people. His job is he has the power to see people on TV and to throw people in there, and that's a safe place.
Right.
Until he goes himself and finds out that it's a horrible place.
Right. And in
right?
his defense, like, he probably thought that that the first 2 victims were murdered in the real
Yes.
world.
Right.
He has no
No,
idea.
he definitely thinks that.
He doesn't know that the real killer, well, A, is Adachi, who gave him this idea in the first place, but B, he doesn't know that the real killer has any knowledge of the TV world or has the same power he does.
Yeah.
How in the world would he have guessed that? And he's just a dude. He has no like other way of actually like protecting these people.
Yeah, so
of course he would use his superpower.
Exactly. He's just a dude, and like he's like, how can I stop people from dying? Because they show on TV and they show up dead.
Right.
Well, put him in the TV because the killer can't get to them there because he assumes wrongly that the killer is killing them using the real world instead of the metaphysical world. Right. So you realize, okay, maybe this guy doesn't actually know what he's doing, and he thinks he's right. Right. So your friends, you get to his hospital room on December 3rd, which is like the landmark day of this game, and there's a giant TV in there, and one of them was like he could escape at any time, and you're at that point you're like, oh crap, like we need to do something or else he's gonna escape from the TV.
Right.
You don't know at this point that like he doesn't want to escape from the TV, he's just freaking out. Right. He has like PTSD basically. Yeah. So your friends are like, two of your friends are like, let's throw him on TV, and other two of your friends are like, I don't know about this. And Naoto, who's the detective who's cool, is kind of like, nah, yeah, let's do it. Right?
Yeah, they're like, let's throw him on the TV and murder him.
Yeah.
And I was like, no.
And a couple of your friends are like, no, that's crazy, don't do that. And what you have to do as the cool main character is, there's a few dialogue choices, and what you have to do to avoid a bad ending here is pick the right answer 6 times in a dialogue choice. So I actually tested them myself because I knew what the right answers were because I watched a playthrough before. But I tested by not giving one of the right answers, and I did get like, I tested the bad end, and I was like, wow, you really have to say all this. Because I thought that you only have to say, wait a second here. But no, you have to say all the 6 things. So you have to say, they're like, throw them in the TV, and you're like, wait a second here. And they're like,
said that.
And they're like, well, what are you talking about? You're like, we're missing something. And you're like, what are you missing? And you say, their true feelings.
Why would you respond to their true feelings there?
And then they say like, what do you mean he already said what he means? And you're like, something's been bothering me. And they say like, what? And you say again, we're missing something. And then they say, dude, you're the worst person in the world. What's happening here? They're screaming at you. And if you say, and then you have to say, calm the hell down. And if you say, if you get 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 right, but get 6 wrong, bad ending. So you have to get all 6 of them right. And then you get to not throw in a TV. Your little sister / cousin comes back to life because she had died.
She comes back to life anyway.
If you throw in a TV, she does not.
If you throw in the TV, she doesn't. But on my first playthrough, I answered like 3 of them right before I started not repeating myself because that's not what humans do.
No, that's a mistake right there.
Yeah. And then at that point, what happens is you do get a kind of good ending where the person that you thought had died comes back to life, but you still have to leave
the normal
town.
Ending.
It's the normal ending. Yeah.
It's still bad because the implication is that the fog is still going to overtake them when they become shadows.
Right.
But your cousin's sister survives because like one of the people that Namatami kidnaps is your little cousin.
Yep.
And that moment is heart-wrenching. Mm-hmm. Like you come home and she's like not there, and you're like, well, what is happening?
I was ready to like
throw hands,
injure a fool. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the podcast I was like about Persona 4. It's like I was enjoying this game until they kidnapped Nanako, and then I was like, I would do a bunch of stuff before I went to the dungeon. When they kidnapped Nanako, and I was like, no, I'm going today.
Now.
Right.
Yeah. So then once you escape this precarious situation of picking the right answer 6 times.
6 times.
What happens next, John?
So then you get another chance to meet people in the hospital,
and Teddy doesn't disappear.
Teddy doesn't disappear. He stays with you, and you get a chance at the hospital, and you get a chance to confront somebody who you have been waiting to confront the entire.
Well, first of all, there's this really cool.
If you're John.
The reason I told John to like keep playing is because there's a really cool like mechanic that I haven't really seen in games that aren't as like point and click murder mysteries, which is you talk to your friend, let's recap this case, what could have happened, and you go outside for like to think,
and you get a chance to pick who it could have been.
And the game is basically like, all right, you thought about all these things, here's the facts, who do you think could be the murderer? And it literally gives you a list of everybody's name that you've met in this game, and maybe someone you haven't met, because depending on the drama and band split, they put that person's name in there too.
But out of sheer consistency, I picked Adachi, and this time, out of all the other times, your friends decide to be like, maybe.
This game, so this part of the game, if you fail to pick Adachi 3 times, you get the normal ending as well.
Oh really? Yeah. There.
So if you fail to pick Adachi 3 times, so if you pick like Dojima, Nanako, it's
Nanako.
Like, yes, none of them, right? You can't. It's like the game makes fun of you. The Nanako, she's like 5. So it's none of them, right? And then the
It'd
game's
be a
like
hell of a
the
choice.
game's like you couldn't figure out what happened. I guess you just go, and then I guess you look up and like the sky is foggy and something, and like it gives you the same ending, right?
Gosh, dang it.
If you pick Adachi, and this is where this game is different. So if you had maxed Adachi to this point, which I think is rank 6 or 7, right? Because he's a social link.
Well, I maxed him.
No,
get him
you
to-
only max him through story. You can only get to 6 or 7 to this point.
Oh, Adachi.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking of Dojima.
No. If you max Adachi to this point, which is like rank 6 or 7,
Yeah.
right? You can be like Adachi, and you're like, oh my god, and you're thinking like it could be Adachi because like the menus are giving you these options, and then it says, do you want to tell your friends about Adachi? Remember this?
Yeah.
If you say no, you're like, are you sure? And you say yes. You choose to protect Adachi, not tell your friends. The game's you go to the police station, tell Adachi like, I know it's you, but I'm not gonna like do anything to you.
You can be like an accomplice?
It's called the
Yeah.
accomplice ending.
Yeah.
What?
And Adachi's like, okay, so prove your loyalty, and he makes you burn the note that he gave you, saying like, because you figure out that like he's the one that was handing you notes, right? That's saying like, don't rescue anymore, and like it's not Namatame gave you this note, it's him. Or dropping off your house. He makes you burn that so they can't use that as evidence. And now he says like, cool, now you burn evidence. You're an accomplice. Put your number on my phone, and every time I need anything, I'm gonna call you, and you better show up. And there's an ending where like you say goodbye to your friends, you can't figure anything out, and then the train kind of goes into a tunnel, and it shows like you grasp your phone, and Adachi like cuts Adachi smiling. Yeah.
If you pick that ending, you're objectively a terrible person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told Phil when I found out about that, I was like, I don't know why anyone would pick that ending.
Yeah, it's just an Easter egg.
Because
cool,
I guess
though.
like one of my critiques about this game, and I think John is kind of on board with me here, Phil is not, is that Adachi
sort of on
is
board.
not a compelling villain.
He's a bad villain.
I'm sort of on board, but I have had more time to digest, and like playing it. Well, I didn't play it the second time, but like playing it after watching it, I'm like,
Right.
I started to see the subtle things that he's doing behind the scenes to like. I at least respect him as a villainous mind,
He has a good villainous
Yeah.
mind. I will give you that.
Yeah.
but I like his motivations are shallow, but I don't. In this case, I don't think that means they're bad. Is
They're-
what I'm saying.
They're standard.
Yeah.
He is the Cyberman in Doctor Who.
It's very uninteresting. It's a type of villain
Yeah.
where like I'm disappointed because it's like
He was
you
a
were
villain.
not
Not angry.
I'm not mad at you. I'm just I'm just disappointed.
Well, so I study horror films, and so I spend a lot of time like looking at villains, and so thinking about like what makes a villain look interesting. And for me, Adachi's not interesting, right? And Phil, you had mentioned to me that like people compare him to the Joker, and the Joker's interesting because earlier, John, you had said that before we started recording, John had mentioned that he thinks like a good villain has to be relatable.
Yeah,
And
you
I'm
have to
thinking,
feel
like-
like you could be that villain.
I'm not entirely sure I can see how the Heath Ledger's version of the Joker specifically.
I think
right? So
that's
it's the Dark Knight.
That's one way the villain could be good, not the only way.
Not the only way,
Maybe.
but it's a primary way. For
I
sure.
feel like Heath Ledger's version of the Joker, Agent of Chaos, just wants to mess
the
with
world burn,
things
yeah.
and see what happens. Not super relatable, but super compelling. That is such a fascinating villain that I absolutely will follow that story.
Mm-hmm.
Adachi is not that. I don't really care about his story so much. It's just like, yeah, okay, you're a pathetic little man-child. Whatever, go away. I want to go fight like the god of death, right? Because she's way more interesting. I don't know if either of you wants to.
No, we'll get into. I think that's interesting. I think there's two things there. One, it's hard to compare to the Joker because like we have maybe not preconceptions, but like we have a conception of Joker being cool.
Sure.
So like just the fact that and Heath Ledger does amazing in that film, and I'm not saying that Adachi's voice actor does poorly. I think it's Ewan Lowenthal. I just it's different.
He does
right.
fine.
Yeah. I think that it's the same kind of thing where like he just wants to watch the world burn, and while that's not a deep motivation, that's just because he's bored and he feels like his life didn't go the way it went. It should have gone, not because of him, but because of everyone else. So he wants the world to basically end, and he doesn't care. And he got a power that he can have fun with. So I don't think he even sees it as like, I'm doing this because I want the world to end. He's more like, I'm bored. You guys amuse me because you're idiots. And he is smart, but he feels like he's the smartest man on earth,
Yes.
smartest person on earth.
Right.
And he feels he's an incel. Right. The first two murders,
100%.
he kills them because they reject his advances, and he's trying to force himself on them.
And
Right.
okay, first of all, the first person he makes advances on, he's got an erotomaniac fixation on.
Yeah.
Right? She doesn't know he exists, so naturally...
And he's saying, like, you're going to reject me after all I did? And he's like, you didn't do anything.
He hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
She doesn't know who he is.
He has some psychosis.
She's the news reporter for everybody.
Yeah, but she doesn't know who he is. He knows who she is, right? So it's erotomania.
So, parasocial relationship.
Exactly, right? It's like if I believe that, insert random celebrity here, like I was entitled to their affections, which makes no sense.
Just because I've seen him on TV being affectionate.
And they have no idea who the heck I am.
Yeah, which is it's an extreme case of parasocial relationship. Usually they don't go that bad.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right. And then the second one, he comes on to a high school student when he's in a position of power over her in the police station. Right. So there's so many layers of just.
And he's just such a dick about it because he's like the second one was easier because she was a high school girl, so she was lighter, and you're like, oh man.
Right.
You're just the worst.
Yeah, because this guy is seriously over here like, what, this 15-year-old rejected me?
Yeah.
I mean, Kubo's shadow being the
Kubo
the
is the fake killer that Adachi tries to set up.
Yes.
Because Kubo, another person with psychosis who wants to take credit for the murders because he's also bored.
But Kubo makes more sense
He does.
as a motivated villain.
Oh, for sure. But I'm saying Kubo wants to take credit for the murders and not just okay, cool,
That's
you
great.
did it, and he tossed him into the TV anyway because he's like, if you did it, but I can't have you confessing to these murders because if you do, then I'd have to stop doing this. Right.
Yeah.
So he tries to kill Kubo also, and Kubo's shadow boss is literally a baby.
A giant baby. Because he's acting like a giant baby.
Yep.
Right, because he is. He's a giant, whiny baby who, wham, the world doesn't treat me the exact way I want it to, therefore I have a right to hurt other people. Not how this thing works, by the way, just for the record. Preaching to the choir, I hope. And, well, the thing is, Adachi's the exact same way, and so it would make sense for his shadow to also just be a giant baby, because that's what he is.
Yes.
He is a pathetic man-child with delusions of grandeur and erotomania and ephebophilia and all this
a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff, right?
But
It's a whole list.
And that's why I think it's not because if it was just a guy that's I want to end the world, and why you live here, and the guy's like, oh yeah, you're right. But Adachi's I literally don't care. He's okay with the world being shadows because then you wouldn't have to worry be with people who annoy him all the time.
It's a nonsense. It's not a reason. That's the same reason as a zombie, who zombies are fun. They're a whole thing. They want to end other things, but that's not
But that's because they're hungry.
exactly. It's not a villainous motivation. And here's the thing. So
that's the thing though. It's you can't. I don't think you can get into the mind of a madman, so to speak. You can't go into the Joker's head and be like, why are you really doing this?
Right. But you're a madman, therefore you're crazy, therefore you do shit because just randomness is a bad villain. It is a villain. It's a villain type. It's a villain that
I think
exists.
it depends on how it's played and how. I think why it isn't is because of you see the amount of his to use another Batman villain here, his two-facedness, right? Where he's he hangs out with you, he goes out to drink with Dojima, he has dinner with you and your family, hangs out with you and your friends, but all the while he's doing that, that's a mask. Right? It's a persona he puts out so that in the background he can be deleting evidence, pushing people into TVs, manipulating someone else to push people into TVs.
That's too much to do for boredom to be the motivation. It's too much. So if we go to Joker, we brought up Joker earlier. We brought up Joker earlier and you said, well, Joker has the same motivations. Joker doesn't. You said Joker just wants to see the world burns. Who says that in the film?
Oh,
Alfred.
Alfred says that in the film. If Batman went to Joker and asked Joker, why are you doing this? Are you just a crazy person? What would Joker say?
I usually don't care.
He would give a very specific, complex reason for the thing he's doing. But that's his
delusion, though. That's what Adachi has. His delusion is I want to make the world somewhere where no one cares about anything.
But Joker doesn't want to do that. Joker's whole MO
but it's okay,
in life...
Their definitions are different. They just have MOs.
Joker wants to see people squirm by removing the structures
of
that
society.
grant them a sense of security.
Yeah.
But he's not doing it in a hedonistic way. I don't think he's operating from a sense of boredom. I'm saying the boredom is a BS motivator for that level and depth. Adachi doing heroin would make perfect sense.
Heroin's hard to come by in Japan.
Adachi planning and contriving multiple murders.
I know a lot of Japanese history and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah.
it's cheap.
Well, how about we take like another villain? How about like Thanos? You know, John actually was able to sort of change my mind about this. Like, a lot of the discussion around, like, Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War, I got the order there reversed, is that Thanos' motivations don't really make a lot of sense. If you snap and get rid of half of all people, how does that actually solve overpopulation? Because the population is just going to rebound, all right? You take 100 rabbits,
you do it again.
take it down to 50 rabbits, you're going to have 100 rabbits again at some
In a
point.
fairly short time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But John pointed out that Thanos he's the mad Titan, right? It's like he's going through serious trauma from where his planet died of overpopulation. So his plan is stupid, but it's supposed to be stupid because he's not supposed to be in his right mind. Right? So we can understand like his motivations and why he does what he does, even though we disagree with what he does. And that is just so much better than Adachi.
Well, and because Adachi is reversed. Adachi has incredible planning, incredible diligence,
He does.
tight manner, and no motivation to back up that incredible diligence, right? And so you end up with a character that feels like they should be better than they are.
Yeah, I think
that's well said.
The thing that I'm like, I agree with everything you said, and the reason I'm like, I don't think he's the best villain ever. I wouldn't put him on like a 10 out of 10.
Sure.
But and I recommend everyone out there, including you two, to listen to a retro RPG. I think is what it's called. They have a podcast on they have a series on villains, and one of them is Adachi, and they talk about like all this stuff. But they talk about how sure the motivation is boredom, but just the amount of like what's the word? Like delusions of grandeur and all this kind of stuff that he deserves these things. And he's essentially getting back at people for not giving him the things he likes.
Right.
And to him, getting back at people is so... Because he doesn't care, maybe he never did, if he's alive or not. Which is why he's like, I'll go to the TV and like die. I don't care. Like, because at the end, when you beat him, he says like, just leave me here. And they're like, no. Because like, you have to suffer in real life for what you didn't hear. Right?
But Adachi is loosely based on Moriarty, right? From the classical Sherlock Holmes myths and tales. So if you've read through, it has a very similar vibe to Moriarty, because Moriarty has these same... He doesn't have the incel vibes. That's a modern take on that. But Moriarty has these, like, I was incredibly bored, I needed things to do, and therefore I did this. But the thing that makes Moriarty better in that motivational category is that Moriarty picks something that makes sense. He doesn't say, I'm going to start killing random people and just have fun doing something because it's easy. He says, oh, I've discovered Sherlock Holmes. Now this is a person that generally interests me, and I am going to very slowly and methodically get into a game with him, and the crimes are just excuses to enter into a game of wits with Sherlock Holmes. If they had gone that direction with Adachi, which really would have made like Naoto the main character, it would have made a lot more sense. But solving your boredom through murder is such a jump.
I think part of that too is that like he does have careful planning once the murders start, but before the murders start, he doesn't. So we know that like he kills the first two, push them into the TV.
Right. Just because.
And then Namatame calls and he's like, I saw this person on TV. They died the next day. I think it's connected. Adachi answers and it's like, I don't think it's connected at all. And then he realizes like, well, if I tell you to save them, then we get this whole situation where you're thinking you're saving people, but you're actually killing them. So I think he kind of is like going with the flow at that point, and then it transforms to something bigger, right?
That's fair, but it feels like
I don't think he meant to be a supervillain in the first place. He's just like, this is fun, I'm going to keep going.
But he did it with the skill and deftness of a supervillain, and it just feels like anybody that would think through their plans to that degree would also think through their motivations beyond I'm bored. And if you were bored, there were better ways.
Yeah, and I think at the end he gets in over his head, and that's why he gets caught. Because like he maybe doesn't have the motivation to be a supervillain. He just has the brains, and at one point he's like, at this point I don't care anymore, kind of thing. And
it feels like the writers had 3 villains in mind and couldn't pick the one they wanted. They had like an incel, that they had a nihilist, and that they had a psychotic murderer, and they couldn't decide which route they wanted to go, so they just did all 3 at once, and they all kind of fall a little short.
And it doesn't quite land for me, but I'm thinking like, a villain who I think threads this needle better. Have you seen House of Cards?
Yeah.
The first 2 seasons of House of Cards, Frank Underwood, that's Kevin Spacey's character, is definitely the villain. And like Adachi, he improvises all the time. Most episodes are him improvising something, but he's always improvising, you realize, throughout the first 2 seasons, with a goal in mind. I'm going to I'm going to put all these little things in motion so that I can gradually step my way up so I can become vice president. But that is just a launching pad so I can become president, right? So he has this trajectory in mind. It's just the movement of how to get there that he has to play things in the moment. He has to improvise as the other people who he needs to be on his side or he needs to defeat also react to the situations. And so he has to think quickly and on his feet a lot of the time. But he does still have that grand goal. And however, this is the part that interests me, is I didn't finish watching House of Cards because I thought season 3 sucked. All right, now I think the general consensus is that it drops off in season 4, so I got off that train a little earlier than most. Maybe I'm wrong. But the reason why I got off is because the character lost his compellingness for me, because you realize that when he gets to be president at the end of season 2, he's essentially won. Right? The villain has gotten what he wants.
The series could have ended there.
Yeah.
It should have ended there, because in season 3, he is basically just losing all the time. And on the one hand, that's because he had no grand ambition beyond getting the position. So he has no idea what to do once he gets there, right? It's that Joker moment of being a dog chasing a car. What are you going to do when you catch it? Get run over, basically. Right? But that also makes him much less interesting, because now there is no grand plan, and there's no winning.
Well, and I think you can have a villain without a grand plan, but it creates a completely different kind of villain, right?
Agreed.
Like, you can have, basically, you have two villains here. You have a mastermind, which has to have a grand plan, it has to have complex motivation.
Has to be Moriarty.
Has to have Moriarty, has to be really complex. Or you can have a monster. You can have a werewolf, right? Which has no grand plan or ambition, which is just rage incarnate. Michael Myers. That terrifies us because they have none. But you can't have a Michael Myers that then you remove his mask and say, why are you doing this? And he says, well, you know, women really haven't treated me right at the beginning part of my life, and I was a little bored on a Tuesday night, and therefore I decided to Michael Myers this
and I think they kind of go in that second round with, like, making it personal, where, like, he's kidnapping, well, he's not, but he's, like, making all their friends get kidnapped, and he's, like, made your little cousin's sister get kidnapped, which is, we all agree, a heinous crime.
Only one of those was actually targeted, though, right? Like, you were not real good friends with Yukiko.
No, and that's part of why I think that, like, a lot of it is improvisation. He's just like, I just want to see where this goes. Which, again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just like, I don't think he's a bad villain in the sense of, like, he must be stopped and he's a sociopath and we need to stop this man.
Right.
But I wouldn't put him at a Moriarty level or, like, a higher level villain. But I don't think he's bad necessarily. I think it's more of like it becomes a personal thing in the end.
I think he's a classic anime villain, which does make me feel like I'm in an anime, which is what I think is the major draw of this game. But animes are not the peak of writing.
In Persona 3,
capability.
There's a mini villain and the big villain. The big villain is, like, literally the god. It's Nyx, incarnation of night and death.
Wow.
And then who's doing this because humans started wishing for death. And then there's a group of other Persona users that are like, we want to keep using our Personas, and if you do the things you want to do and stop Nyx, we can't use them anymore. Right? So there's, like, more new ones there. And then in 5, there's 2 higher level villains. So I think they're trying to make it more personal this time, and maybe they miss something, but I don't think it's bad, and I think it's still compelling.
Yeah.
But I agree. So I wanted to get off with this was a huge tangent.
Yeah, sorry.
But one thing I wanted to ask is that in Persona 4, Adachi is not a social link.
Oh, interesting. That's a golden edition?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that would have been clear that he was the villain if he wasn't a social link, or it's clear that he is?
Clear that he was the villain because he was a social link.
You think
because
so?
I was always finding him at Junes, and I was like, what the heck are you doing
just
hanging around?
In Persona 4, he does that too. You just can't get close.
But then when you talk to him, he has, like, real weird, flimsy excuses for it. He's like, yeah, this old lady usually feeds me tuna casserole, and I don't really like her. And so
did you continue that? Because she does.
No,
it's real. No, she, like, shows up and, like, every day she's like, I'm gonna bring us some more stuff, and he's like, please don't. And confuses him. But, like, you get this really cute moment where he says, like, I don't like her. I forget what the traditional Japanese, like, it's a traditional Japanese, like, boil of, like, different vegetables and stuff.
Okay.
And she keeps the lotus root. Like, he says, like, her lotus root is, like, way too, like, tough. And then, like, rank 5 or 6 or something, her son shows up, who's also named Toru, which is his first name. That's why she misses him up. And she says, and when they're walking out of Junes, she's like, I'm gonna make Nobimono, I think is what it's called, because I know you like it. And he says, oh great, keep the lotus root tough, just how I like it. It's like a real warm moment. You're like, oh, she does it on purpose. But yeah, so he in Persona 4, you can still talk to him, and he says all this stuff. You just don't get closer to him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's not a social link. So when you're picking like who killed, you can still pick Adachi, but it's not one of your social links.
It would make it harder.
I think it made it harder.
Yeah,
I think
it would make it harder.
Definitely better to have him as a social link. You want the killer to be a character who actually matters. I hate it when the killer is always that one character that you saw one time at the beginning of the episode and then didn't see again the entire time.
Oh, we'll get to that. So John, we figured out. I forgot where we stopped. Figured out that
Adachi was the killer.
Adachi was the killer.
You go to confront him.
Him.
You bring up some pieces of information that I didn't. So I didn't figure it out using this piece of information, but it was a really interesting piece of information. Naoto sort of confronts him and says, "When you saw the
really
journal,
interesting. I didn't notice that either.
I didn't connect those at all.
Because so Namatami has a journal that says, "Here's all the people I saved.
Here's all the people I've saved."
Yeah.
And it lists people that were never under investigation. They just
or
disappeared.
listed as missing. Because they were gone for like a day and a half. Because you saved them.
Sometimes like half a day if I was really on top of it.
Yeah.
And then, so he's got this journal full of people, and when Adachi sees this journal, he says, well, that settles it then.
As if he knew that they had been gone.
Yeah, he's like, well, that settles it. These people are in there too. And you're like, wait, how do you know that these people had any involvement in this case whatsoever?
Yeah. Naoto, man.
Naoto knew, which was really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know why Naoto didn't tell me or didn't defend me the 6 other times we were Junes, and I was like, it could be a police officer. But, yeah. So then you go to confront Adachi. Adachi goes and runs into the TV. You follow him into the TV. Classic, beat the bad guy. Then
there's something there too. Did you guys go alone to the TV to talk to him?
No.
If you go alone to the TV to talk to him, then you can max out a social link.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then because it stops there if you don't. If you do, you talk to him. He says a bunch of stuff like "come find me," all this kind of stuff, supervillain stuff.
Yeah, I stopped it.
Yeah. But before you go with your friends, you can go by yourself, and he shoots like a bullet by your head. Doesn't kill you though. Yeah, it's a whole thing. And then you go back the next day, beat his dungeon. He has the persona that's called Calamity Izanagi, so he has the shadow version of yours. Persona.
Yeah.
Which is indication of you got your power from the same person and he's got corrupted. Right. And by the way, Magatsu Izanagi is the best persona in Persona 5 if you buy the DLC. Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is his persona. So do that. It's great. The game skips. Then you do a ski trip.
Ski trip
was
Valentine's
fun.
Day.
Ski trip was fun. Not gonna lie, I laughed at the ski trip.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So basically, you go to a ski trip with your friends. You all hang out together. Risei's being real clingy. Chie's I like how whenever Risei's I'm gonna hang out with him, but she says something real aggressive, and Chie is man, this girl's trouble. And did you guys go to the cabin in the woods?
Yeah.
Yeah. So who did you go to the cabin with?
You can go. So
what happens is you go skiing one last time, and you can choose who you want to go skiing with. And when you're done, and this can happen because I've had that happen to me in real life. A blizzard comes through midway you're skiing, really fast, and you get stuck in the snow. And you're like, oh my god, there's a cabin, let's go in there. So there's this whole anime moment of are you gonna warm each other up? Yeah. How are you gonna do it? But if you go with the guys, it's hilarious because if you're with the guys, are because Kanji said because
we're freezing but refuse to cuddle.
Well, you get a little fire going, and Yosuke's this fire's too small to keep us warm, and they kind of look at each other, and Kanji, instead of going let's huddle together, Kanji goes, "We'll set fire to the floor then. It's made of wood." And Yosuke's that would kill us, you idiot. And Kanji gets mad because he's I don't see you giving any ideas. Eventually, they found out that I don't know what happened to you guys, but with me, a TV in the background pops open or pops on.
Yeah.
Does that happen to you?
Yeah.
I didn't get this bit.
You got this?
Yeah.
How far did you get with Marie?
With Marie?
Yeah.
6 or 7.
Maybe that's enough because you can only get the TV to come on if you're high enough with Marie.
Yeah.
And that's how you get the Marie optional dungeon. Did you get that?
I did not get the Marie optional dungeon.
Yeah. So the
interesting.
TV comes on. They're what's happening to the TV? And they all go to look at the TV. And when they're all looking at the TV, they kind of crash and fall over each other or something. And the girl's walking at this time, and Risei's do you want us to leave you alone, or just?
Amazing.
It's funny.
Amazing.
But then in the ski trip, what happens there is if you have Marie maxed, that TV becomes a portal to Marie's dungeon, because you find out that Marie is actually the boss you beat, because you beat Adachi and then you beat the boss, right? You beat the god, right? Kunino Sagiri, which is like a giant eyeball that releases the fog, and he's like, I'm doing this because humans asked to die. Or asked to like lose, or they lost their will.
The embodiment of nihilism.
Exactly. And you're like, no, we didn't do that. So you fight him, and at the end he says like, I will be back, or like there's more of me, or something like that. And you're like, whatever, dude. See you later. And then when you get to Marie's dungeon, she reveals that she's the other half of this thing. When he put the fog out, she's the one sucking it in.
That's why she showed up out of nowhere, and nobody knows what she's doing.
That's why in the first scene of the game, you see Marie walking around because she's like, she's the other half of this god, kind of. Okay, there's more to it. And then she pulls in the fog, and she's like, I'm gonna kill myself, basically. I'm gonna like let myself get trapped in this tomb, because if I get out, I'm the fog. I'm the reason that people die on Earth. So you go to save her. The thing is that her dungeon is the hardest thing in the game.
Is it?
So her dungeon has several levels that have like they're set levels. You know how a few dungeons levels, they're all procedure generated, but not all of them.
Yeah.
A few of them are set. Her dungeon has 3 levels that are set that the enemies do not show up on screen, even if you have Rise maxed out. So you can't see where the enemies are, and you can't see where anything else is. The map is all in fog of war. The thing is, like, every time you go through a doorway, you have a 50-50 chance of getting attacked by a shadow. The other thing that's bad here is that every time you do a battle, once you finish that battle, your mana gets halved.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's rough.
So, like, you don't know if you're going to a battle, and even if you go into a battle and you escape, halved. So, what the game tells you is, like, maybe you can stay in battle a little longer and, like, because, like, they give you... Also, I forgot to tell you, they take away all your items, everything, all your equipment, all your items, everything is gone. So you have no items, and your equipment is all, like, your sword is, like, one attack, 99 accuracy. Your armor is one defense, 1 evasion. But the one thing is that all your accessories recover 8 SP per turn.
It's a forced hardcore run.
Yeah. So what it does is, like, it tells you, like, maybe if you stay in battle, you can recover more SP than you use. The problem is that all the shadows you find are immune to physical and are weak to every element, except, like, insta kills.
I was gonna say.
So you have to use magic to kill them. So I got into this mood where I was like, okay, so, like, I brought Yosuke with me because I never use him because he has like Makajama, which is like silences the foes. So you silence them for 3 turns, everyone recovers, but the problem is that they hit really hard because these are hard shadows. So eventually you're like, it's not worth it to do this. So I had 2 separate battles with like random shadows that were 40 minutes long each.
Gosh.
Because I was trying to recover all my party's SP, and as soon as you get out, halved.
Was that enjoyable for you?
It was not enjoyable. I was doing it and I was like, I hate this. And what I didn't realize is that when I got to the final level finally, and I was like, oh my god, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
Because they give you items during the dungeon that recover like 20 SP or so. When I got to the final level and you can like go back to the beginning. Right. I didn't notice this, but like in the very beginning of this area, because it's not the usual like TV area, the fox is there. And I was like, I have 1.5 million yen. I could have been coming back from every level. Yeah, so that was annoying. But then you get to the final. You have to fight. First, you fight Marie, who's hard to fight, and then at one point it's kind of an endurance thing because at one point she puts up a shield that nothing can go through, but then she like tires herself out, and then the real like monster inside Marie comes out, and you have to fight that thing. It's called like.
What does it look like?
It's called Aminosagiri, I think. It looks like it's another eyeball.
No, they didn't like try.
No, actually, no. I'm sorry. They did actually. It's not an eyeball. She's like a giant demon lady with like eyes, like something out of Pan's Labyrinth is the best way I can describe it.
Okay.
And she repels everything.
Everything. So how do you
repels everything? You have to use break items.
Oh, you have to like reduce.
Because the game, like in the dungeon, there's a few treasure chests which I almost never open because they also have a 50-50 chance of being a shadow. But if you do and you defeat shadows, they drop break items.
Yeah, I use those on the final boss.
So you have to use a break item and then attack, break item, attack until it dies. But it's using like insta kills and almighty spells, so it hits really hard.
That just sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I did not enjoy that. That was the part of this game that I least enjoyed. I think I wrote here, what you have to do to get the true golden ending with the epilogue is you have to max Marie out, and then you have 1 day to beat her dungeon, which is 2/13, so February 10th, the day before Valentine's Day. And I wrote here, you have to complete Marie's dungeon. This is a bitch, by the way.
So spoilers. What is the golden ending? What do you get for that?
So we'll get there. So after you do that, you have Valentine's Day. You visit everyone you maxed out on the last day of the game, right? Which is March 20th.
Yeah.
This is where Brandon got.
Yeah.
This is what you got to. So Brandon, at this point, did you talk to everyone?
Yeah.
And then what happens?
You realize.
So you go around town and you're like, hey, person, I'm leaving. I'm going to talk to people. And the game keeps telling, like, there's more people you have to talk to, and you go talk to them.
Talk to this person.
Once you talk to these people, the game's like, you've talked to everyone that you've like gotten close to this year. What do you want to do?
Right. One of the options is leave town.
Yes.
That is not the option you want to pick.
And you don't want to pick that.
The other option is something's still not right here.
Yeah.
And
And you say, like, do you want to go home? And you say, like, no. And the game says, what do you still have to do here?
That's
The game is trying to, like, gaslight you so
it
hard.
does. It tries to gaslight you, and of course, I will say, this is a game that if I didn't have access to the internet while playing it, I would have hated.
Well, that's why, like, people that were playing this in, like, 2008 were like, you didn't know there was a true ending until your friend was like, oh, I talked to this person, I got a true ending. You're like, bullshit.
Right.
That's not, like, it's like
It's a
missing.
peekaboo.
It's missing. No, yeah, it's like that's not real.
Exactly.
It is though. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's how it feels. With the internet, I love it,
with the internet.
but only with the internet.
So then what happens?
So I'm trying to remember exactly how you get there, but if you find Dojima and Nanaka and you talk to them again.
Well, so you have to go to Junes, right? Because it's like the game says, like, what do you want to do then? And you're like, and it gives you like 3 options. One of them is go to Junes. You go there, and it's like, you get to Junes, and the game is like, are you sure you want to be here? And you're like, yes. And you're like, and the game's like, well, I guess you could check out the food court one last time. So when you go there, all your friends show up, and you talk about like, wait, how did you get these powers in the first place? And then you're like, well, I guess there's something behind even the thing behind. There's a god behind the god. And then you go to find Nanako and Dojima in the riverbank. And then they're like, oh yeah, I guess you talked to the gas station attendant on your first day here.
Yeah, you remember the killer showing up?
Where he was like...
Yeah.
Do you remember what happens when you like shake his hand on the first day?
He just says, there's some part-time jobs around here, you should get a part-time job, right?
Yeah, but when you shake his hand,
But what else?
you immediately feel dizzy afterwards.
Is the gas station attendant a god hanging out in disguise?
The gas station attendant is Izanami.
The goddess of death in Japanese creation myth, which is your persona is
Yeah,
Izanagi.
we got told at the festival.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Your goddess of creation is it's Izanagi and Izanami. They're brothers who are also husband and wife. They bear life
Yeah.
in this universe, right? They're not the top gods, but they were like created to make life.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens is like in their creation story is Izanami ends up dying, giving birth to the fire god, who then gets killed by Kanji's persona. So Kanji's persona is Take Mikazuchi.
Okay.
He kills this guy, who gets actually, I forget exactly. He goes after him. I forget exactly what happened, but the fire god comes out of Izanami. She dies because the birth was like of a fireball.
And then she comes back as a horrifying monster.
So she goes to hell, which is Yomi in Japanese culture. So you have to cross a specific portal and you go into hell. Right? It's very similar to other myths.
Right.
And Izanagi is like, I don't accept this. I want my sister/wife back. Goes into hell to find her, but when he gets down there, she's not looking. She's facing the other way. Everything is darkness, and he's like, "Hey, like, I'm here for you. I'm a god. Let's talk to the god of the underworld and get you back." And she's like, "Okay, but like, you can't talk to him. And also, I've already consumed the food of hell,
Right.
so I'm bound to this place.
Very Persephone style, man.
But I'll see what I can do. So just don't look at me." She says, "Like, don't look at me." And he's like, a stupid man, right? So he's like, "Whatever. I'll look at you if I want to." Turns on a light, like he flips on a torch or something. Looks at her and sees that she's now a decomposed corpse with flesh hanging off her
Horrifying
bones.
spiders everywhere.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
She gets angry because he broke his promise and looked at him, and she's like, and he's like, "I don't want you anymore because you are horrifying." She gets angry and chases him out of hell, or chases him, and he managed to escape. But when he crosses the Yomi barrier, right, the little like torii gate, she says, as revenge, I will take 800 lives every day.
Yeah.
And he says, to make up for that, I will put forth 1,000 lives every day.
Yeah.
So they are the dichotomy of like creation, right?
Life
She
and death.
becomes, she's not the goddess of death, but she's like the reason people die, basically.
Right.
And he's the reason people are born.
We get to fight her at the end?
Yeah.
What does she
Yeah.
look like?
So the thing is, like, what happens there, she gives you powers because she's trying to like prove that mankind doesn't want to be alive anymore, because she wants to take everyone into the underworld, right? That's her thing.
Gotcha.
And in the background, you have this whole Nyarlathotep and what's his name?
You said Nyarlathotep and
Philemon. In the
Philemon.
background are like arguing over, like, they're basically giving different gods powers to help each other, right?
Right.
So she gives you power because she's like, I want to take everyone to the underworld, but like for that to happen, I need people to wish it.
Right.
So for that people to wish it, I have to give these people these powers. So you turn out to have, you get power that you didn't expect, which is you get Izanagi as a persona, which is the one thing that can oppose her, basically, right? Because it's the god of creation.
him, right?
Yeah, so when you go to her dungeon, when you fight her, the first part of the fight, she is clad in a white robe and looks like a human. Once you beat that part,
Does she look like the lady at the shrine?
no, she looks like the
No.
gas station attendant
Okay.
without a hat.
Okay.
The second part of the fight is
How to even describe? It's like a giant skeletal centipede demon.
Yeah.
It's metal, and I love the design.
Oh,
It
it's
looks
metal, and like
super cool.
when it closes in, and like when it does attacks, it, like the mouth is like moving around, and like the hair is like,
Oh.
yeah, no, it's metal as hell.
by,
Yeah.
by far like the most horror movie
Yeah.
of the villains. In
No,
terms
it's
of
metal.
design.
And then so you eventually start, wailing on her, we're beating her, and then she started using this move that's like Curse of Death or something.
1,000 curses.
A
I
1,000
think.
curses or something, and she like, it's an insta kill spell that you can't block and pulls your party members into the ground and they disappear,
Yep.
and
Oh,
you can't
gosh.
you can't recall them.
That was almost as bad as the one where they were turning your party members against you.
Oh, that's
I
the worst.
Hated that.
But yeah,
Terrible.
so they do that, right? And then eventually does it to you, and then you go into this like purgatory realm where you hear all your friends talking like, "Come on, man!
Yeah.
All the social links you max come talk to you. Like, get up, let's do it." You get back, and then you get your ultimate persona, which is Izanagi no Okami, which means like technically Izanagi big god, but it's just like the ultimate version of him.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, great god, and he has a move that she can't block and kills her. So it's another battle of endurance. So you have to get to the point where she kills you and you have to come back.
Wow.
Yeah, but she becomes like the version of her in Yomi in Hell, which is a skeletal monster with like flesh hanging off her bones
And Brandon got to this part?
yeah.
So that means there's one more super secret ultra boss after that.
No. This is the last boss.
Okay.
But like, so then if you beat this boss, you get the true ending, which is the fog is gone from both worlds. Turns out the TV world is now beautiful and like, as if like the representation. Brandon, you can back me up here. I think it's like mankind's collective unconscious is now at peace.
This has been purged.
Yeah.
So like this world is now a beautiful forest, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. So you get out. You're like Teddy's like, I'm gonna go back to that world and like help it stay this way, and like you all have like your little moments, right? So you leave.
Do we ever learn what the fuck Teddy is?
He is he used to be a shadow,
He used to be a shadow.
but he like gained desire, so he became a person.
Okay, okay.
Sure. He's the opposite of like you. When you go to the TV, you become a shadow. When he was a shadow and became a person.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you do all of this stuff, right? Plus you max out Marie and you beat her dungeon, right? You do all this stuff like when the game asks you to leave town, you say no a bunch of times. You beat the final boss.
Yeah.
Talk to the gas station attendant. Go to the Velvet Room. A bunch of stuff. You then get the golden ending, which is like 2 months later. You visit town.
You get more time in town?
Yeah, you visit town and like you come in and like your friends surprise you and they're all wearing different clothes because like it's a
been time.
representation of like people growth.
Right.
Like Chia's hair is different. Naoto's wearing feminine clothing. It's like a whole like Kanji's hair's
Wow.
black. It's like a whole like you see their transformation really paying off, right? Or like not transformation, but like their growth is happening.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that so like it's funny because you can say like, "Hey guys, I missed you," but you can also say, "What the hell are you wearing?" And I obviously picked that one. And Yugi goes like, "You're talking about Kanji, right? Yeah, he's so dumb, basically," which was funny. So then you all eat dinner together, right, with Nanako and Dojima.
Yeah, yeah.
You find out that Nanako's learning the piano because her mom used to play the piano, and like she wants to play for her dad the song that he likes the most, and it's a real nice moment.
Cute.
And then as they're all eating dinner, it turns out that on TV, the new weather lady comes on, and it's Marie.
Wow.
So Marie is Izanami. The reason she had a comb was because she split into two, and then the mean Izanami made the two lesser gods that fought you first.
Okay.
So Marie is Izanami. She's essentially a goddess. She can control stuff.
Hence the Aeon persona.
Yeah, exactly. So she says oh, it looks like it's gonna be sunny, but actually it's gonna be sunny because I wanted to, because a friend of mine's in town. So I'm gonna make sure it's sunny. And like people on TV are like, oh, okay, Marie-chan, you should haha, that's funny. And she's like, no, I'm serious. It's gonna be sunny the whole time, and like all this stuff. And also, if you max out her rank and you like romance her, she'll say, by the way, I still love you. I hope you enjoy your time here. And everyone in TV is like, oh my god, like what the hell? And they're all freaking out because they know it's about you. And Dojima's like, ha, wasn't that your name? As if. And then the game ends with you all taking a picture of you all together with the new clothes, and Marie's there and all this stuff. And I cried.
It's cute.
I cried.
I like that a lot.
I cried. And I cried because I kind of wanted to get into this, and it's just part of I didn't cry because the game ended, or I didn't cry because of the characters or something. But I cried because it gave me a nostalgia, not for me playing this game in 08, because I didn't, but for something that didn't that happened in my life, but did not this way, right? It's a nostalgia for. I remember being in high school and being at the point where we are all going our separate ways now,
we won't see
and
each
this
other
is
again.
the last time we're gonna hang out, and we were all important in each other's lives. And sure, I'll come back and I'll visit, but it'll never be the same.
Yep.
And I just had this moment of man, because I have moved 6 or 7 times in my life, right? Because from Brazil and stuff. So I've had this experience a few times. And it's interesting because nostalgia, so to get into a little pixel death here, so nostalgia is a bittersweet emotion, and they call it that because it's a longing for something that can never happen again. So it's a happy memory, sweet, but it's sad to think about because it's never going to happen again.
Right.
So bitter, right? So there's a lot of research on nostalgia in video games and how nostalgia has a direct impact on well-being, because it creates a sense of fulfillment and elation. So you're like, I did this. This is a part of my life. I remember doing this. It was fun. And then you feel in the moment, even though you're bittersweet, you feel fulfilled because you remember something that happened in the past, right? It also has a direct impact on enjoyment and appreciation, on how much you enjoy something, which is why nostalgia purchases are such a thing, right? Or one of the reasons. It also provides temporal escapism to perceived or real existential threats. So if you're ever confronting your own existence, looking at memories.
When I'm having a bad day, we go back and play the video games that feel comfortable.
And another thing is that a big theme of this game is memories.
Yeah.
So if you hang out with Marie, she goes from I don't have any memories to you convincing her to now you do because you're making memories with us.
Yeah.
And whenever you go on a ski trip, they're like, I want to make memories with you, because I think it's a realization that we don't have as teenagers, but they do because of the writing, that this will not be forever, but the memories will.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. You want to know something wild? Just a crazy trip?
Yeah.
Last night, I had a dream that I was hanging out with some high school friends on a trip to Japan.
Yeah,
and if there's nothing more that confirms exactly what you're saying, it's like that. It was some of my friends from high school were on a trip to Japan. I don't know, I was giving a guest lecture at Tokyo University, right? And they had decided to come because dream logic.
Yeah.
But that pulls up exactly what you're saying. That is what the game's trying to inspire, and it did do that.
And I have here, and Brendan put a comment on this. So games are one of the most powerful nostalgia elicitors. And Brendan said, I would like to hear more about this. And part of it is because so the games can do this in a few different ways, right? It's not, like I said, my nostalgia with this game wasn't the game. It was the situation that the game portrayed. Right? It's an entire year in someone's life, and you're leaving, which is something I have done before. We've all experienced this, right? And being in high school and being this is it.
Is it?
I can still hang out with you guys, but it's never going to be the same.
We're gonna be friends when I come back into town, but
never gonna be the same.
Not gonna have every.
And sure, we'll all remember fondly, and we'll still be really good friends. But that moment is gone, and that's okay. It's kind of what this game is saying.
Right.
That's why you have the memories, you have the photos. And Persona 4 Golden adds an album thing that you can go to your couch and sit down and look at your previous hangouts with people. Right.
I did see that.
So they can do that, and they can also do something where you are remembering what's happening in the game. Obviously, any sort of media, right? You can watch a movie about someone as a child in Wyoming, and you'd be like, ah, yes.
Yep.
Or, but what games also do is that they have a mechanical reference point. Mm-hmm. So when you're watching a film, you can get nostalgia for things that happen in that town, but that's not what I used to do.
Right.
In the game, you can have I remember playing this with my brother in our basement.
That's what I was gonna say. Like,
So you're remembering the
relational.
experience of playing it and how you felt then beyond what's happening in the game.
Yeah.
So it creates another anchor to your nostalgia, ship,
Well,
basically, right?
I'm never not going to associate Persona with this podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like with talking with you guys, with hanging out, with Phil in particular. Like Persona and
Yeah.
Phil are just
as they should.
100%.
That's what I
interlinked in my
want.
mind.
That's what I want.
That's what the goal
That's
of this.
my ego has to be entirely Persona.
Like even if I play like Persona 8 far down the
Yeah.
line, I'm gonna be like, man, Phil.
Oh, we'll be doing this, yeah.
Hopefully, we'll be on episode
persona in the
300 by
real,
now.
Phil's persona in the real world is narcissist. Just so we're all clear.
Nice. But yeah, so it was giving me nostalgia for something that happened in my own life.
Yeah.
And I thought it was another interesting notion of how games can do this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research out there on this. I recommend looking at Tim Wolf's stuff. That looks a lot about how Pokemon Go is really good at listing nostalgia, even though it's a new game, right? How these games. It doesn't have to be an old game to bring nostalgia. It can be a game that you've never played before to bring nostalgia. All this kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Do you have any other points on that? Because I knew.
Oh no, I just
Yeah.
wanted to hear more about it.
Sure. I was wondering if you have any other questions or points to add after we did talk about it. But,
No. I think that kind of.
yeah. So
Give me
there's
an
a lot of
idea
research out there, and I
about
can send you some of the papers because they're really, really interesting.
That sounds really cool.
So one thing. Okay, so actually, let's move on to another thing, which is let's not cover any more. We covered a lot of story here. Let's talk about our favorite party lineup for battle. Right. So you have. So this is So this is mechanics, right? You battle. It's a turn-based system, and you battle your enemy. You have 4 people on your team, including you. So 1 plus 3. So let's start with Brandon. What was your party?
So my party lineup, I had to be there. I would have rotated me out otherwise.
That is high self-esteem.
High self-esteem. Look, you guys, it feels like you can save the world without me. How about you guys just go?
Okay, look, so my persona's a blobfish. Sorry, I couldn't.
Blobfish are dangerous. All that mucus. They're dangerous.
I couldn't even say it with a straight face. I just cracked myself. I'm so sorry. So my party lineup was me, Yukiko, Kanji, and Chie. Chie had a lot of AoEs, a lot of physical
What's
damage.
AoE?
Area of effect attack, so something that would hit multiple targets.
Yep.
She had a lot of abilities to hit all of the targets, which was great because on very easy that means that she can sometimes just finish
Yeah,
the
so
fight.
she's the physical all hitter, where Kanji is the physical specialist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
And so Kanji again was the physical specialist, also with some lightning attacks. Yukiko was healing and fire, which she was quite
She's the
good
best
at.
mage in the game.
Yeah, and my character changed depending on which persona I was using, but by the end had AoEs and damage abilities with some healing abilities as well. So kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah,
a little
that's
bit.
the idea, right? And the idea is your character is never going to be the best damage giver or never going to be the best healer, but it can do everything.
All the stuff.
Yeah. And Kanji also became a bit of a debuff machine because he learns a skill.
He has Masukakunda.
Is that what
Masukunda,
is that
which
what
is
that's called?
it's decrease evasion
For all of
Yeah.
for all
Yes.
foes. That thing is huge.
I
Great.
spammed that like clockwork every 3 turns
Yeah,
during
that
that
thing is
final
huge.
dungeon when I
Yeah.
finally had it. By far my favorite skill in the entire game. Made my quality of life instantly increase. Thank you, Kanji. But otherwise, he was pure damage. And I think he actually did have 1 healing skill, maybe?
He did, but there's no reason to keep it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever used
Yeah.
it, but it was there just in case.
We talked about this. You didn't use skill cards. You made it through the whole game without using skill
It's
That
not.
is
It's,
very
you don't
true,
really
yeah.
have
Wow.
to.
Yeah.
I actually was listening to a podcast on Persona 5. They're like, I used skill cards 3 times my entire playthrough. I used them because I kept 1 Persona the whole time. But
You did?
yeah, I'm talking about that here in a little bit. But you don't it's a mechanic that you use. It's usually only used where you are min-maxing Persona, so you're I'm gonna get the best Persona in the game, but they happen to have a thing that they're weak to. So you use the skill card to put a repel thing there.
Yeah. Essential in my mind. But we'll talk.
I think it's essential if you're trying to min-max Personas. If you're not and you're very easy, I don't think it's essential.
Essential still.
Definitely when it's not essential. I did beat Izanami without
Yeah, you
doing
didn't even
it.
get there. So you don't...
That being said, I will say that my combat lineup, like talking to these guys, was definitely not as optimized as either of them.
Yeah, that's
and
okay.
only worked because I was playing very easy. I definitely could tell that were I playing this on normal, I would have spent more time learning the game mechanics because I would have had to.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this too because I'll go into mine here. So I had Yukiko because she's the best healer and best magic dealer in the game.
Yep.
Right? Especially with her ultimate skill, which you get when you rank them up like an extra level after 10.
Right.
Which is like burning petals, and she does like severe fire damage to all foes or something like that. And then Kanji physical damage was, I was telling Brandon, because I went back and I redid the dungeons, because if you redo them and beat the mini boss on top of them, you get the best weapon possible for every character.
Oh.
Naoto's is +5 in every stat.
That's real
Bonus.
good.
It's real good. But what you do, what happens when you do that too is that you pick up a lot of levels.
Yeah.
So my character was literally level 99.
I got you. I can make it to 84.
And Kanji was level 93 and his strength was 91. So that with power charge, which is a skill you can learn that is like the best skill in the game. Basically, you makes your next physical attack or next mind attack if it's mind charge. In Persona 5, it's just charge and concentrate, is what they're called.
Right.
Do 2.5 times damage, and if you buff your attack, it does like 2.94 damage or something like that, because it's like it scales. So Kanji on the final boss, the final boss was doing like 1,500 damage. Yeah, and like everyone else was doing like 400, and he's easily doing the most damage by far.
Correct.
Like one turn with a Kanji hit got me to the point where like it's midway of the final boss fight.
Yeah.
And then I had Naoto too, because Naoto had the Almighty spell.
Almighty.
And then Naoto also has Mind Charge, which
Yep.
makes it stronger, and has Heat Riser, which is buffs every single stat. And she has all of the like insta kill spells. So whenever I got caught in a little fight, I'm like insta kill, don't care.
Yeah.
Because she also learns Invigorate.
Right.
So she's recovering her own SP every turn by herself.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was my party for just dungeons, but at one point they got so high in level that I couldn't bring Chie back in because they were level 90 and she was level 75.
Right.
Even though I like Chie because Chie also gets power charge.
Right.
Right. And God's Hand, which is the best physical move in the game. By the time I got to that point, I couldn't bring him back. But yeah, it was. I was like, it was. But the thing is that my character, like I said, I told John, don't try to keep a persona the entire game. That's dumb. Don't do it. And I did that because I got into this really weird situation where I fused a persona called Omoi Kane, which is like a brain
With tentacles.
Yeah. In the first like 5 hours of the game, that somehow came out with every single buff and debuff. So all his skills were, he had Tarunda, Rakunda, and Sukunda, which is like make them attack, defense, and like evasion worse.
Yep.
And all of the buffs. So all 3 of the buffs.
Yep.
And as I was like, this is pretty good, so I just try to like keep him atop my party, atop my persona thing. So whenever I beat someone, he would get experience. And then you can get cards in the shuffle time, like the little mechanic thing, that are like skill up.
Yep.
So eventually all my skills were Ma, so they were hitting everyone all the time. So I would start fights with being like decrease attack, and then everyone would like power charge, decrease defense. Everyone would like do another setup, decrease evasion, and everyone's attacking, and I'm killing everything.
Yep.
Right? So I never did damage, but I also gave it a skill card for Megidola, which is high almighty damage.
Yep.
So whenever I needed to attack, I could.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was like, and at the end, that thing that I fused at like level 14 was level like 82.
Yeah.
Yeah, with like this second highest magic stat only after Yukiko, which was like 87. Yeah.
Jeez.
So I ended up with a really powerful main character that did no damage because he just brought everything down. So he became my main support, and everyone else was just doing damage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
John, what'd you have?
So I've talked about this before, but I played a lot of like World of Warcraft as a kid when I was growing up, and so I modeled my team after sort of a World of Warcraft party. So because I had 4 people, so I had Yukiko as the healer, and her primary role was like healing, and then she did fire damage, right, high magic. And then I had Kanji as physical attacking, almost the same as you, right, buffed the heck out of it. And then I had a CC'er, like a debuff. So I had Teddy on the team, And
Yeah,
Teddy
he's
was
the best
my
buffer debuffer if you're gonna go that route.
and Teddy was my Oyakono, so I taught him all the buffers,
Yeah.
all the debuffers, and his job on the team was just to buff people.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was playing DPS with you, and so my job was to do as much damage as possible.
What's DPS?
Damage per second.
Yeah.
Which in this case should be DPR, damage per round.
per round.
Yeah.
Right. So then that was sort of his role, and then on top of that, because I took a shine to the Justice Arcana early on, which is all angels and angel themed, and they get a lot of light abilities, and so I, following Phil's advice, didn't keep the persona the whole way,
Which is the way to do it,
and just slowly worked my way all the way up the Justice personas. So I'd fuse them and keep the moves from the past ones that were good to move them up, and so what you end up with is an angel that can insta kill anybody and has like 2 things that buff the chance of that to hit.
And they stack.
And on very easy, my chance to hit with an insta-kill light spell is basically like 90%. And I can kill anything that is affected by that. And then, when that doesn't work, I have almighty damage that I'm self-buffing as well.
Yeah.
So I walk in, I was telling them, like, at the end, Adachi gives this speech when he gets possessed by the evil god that's like, you don't know, you will have to fear me and what I can create. I was like, dude, I've got literally the Ark of the Covenant right here. I'm just going to open it up and I'm going to melt your face, and that's what's going to happen. And maybe that only works on very easy, but I had to the point where
that strategy would work on the others too. It would just be, because like the nulls and like weaknesses don't change in shadows.
Right.
So it'd work in the other ones. The problem I would see there is that it would take a lot more SP to do that, because you're
tons of SP.
Yeah.
I'm using like 18 SP a round, but my guy regains 8 automatically because I would basically turn mine into what I'm understanding Naoto is.
It would be hard, because when you got to the boss, you would be a little under-leveled, and in normal that would matter.
Yeah, and so I wasn't under-leveled because when I went through the dungeon, I fought every single shadow.
Yeah.
I didn't skip a single one because my fights were dead next, dead next. And I just like eviscerated everything through the entire dungeon. Yeah. One punch, right? One punch. The light of God, literally. Because I was using Uriel for a lot of them, and then Sorosha at the end. And then because Uriel and Sorosha also have like nulls to like wind and fire, I was just immune to wind and fire.
Yeah.
So anything that was trying to attack me, I was like, that's hilarious. And my goal was generally, if I couldn't kill them instantly, if I downed them, then Kanji gets that move that's like, if the enemy is downed.
That was like,
and I can do like 2k of damage in one hit.
Yeah.
And so that was, my job was to down them, then we buff, then we heal everybody, then Kanji uses a physical attack that uses like 200 health, but who cares, because Yukiko's going to heal in the next round.
And Kanji recovers health every time, right? Because he has regenerate. So
all
like,
the time.
My Kanji ended up with 900 base HP.
Yeah. So I think I ended up very, very over-leveled for an easy game, because the thing.
What level were you with the Adachi fight?
Like 84.
Yeah, you're supposed to be like 80 for the final boss.
I ended the game somewhere in the 70s.
Yeah.
Because I just, like, I'm not afraid of stuff. I was
literally had angels on your side.
Literally had the power of God.
One thing you want to talk about was like the balancing mechanics. Remember?
Yeah.
From the last game, you talked about. I asked like, what do we think of the balance of each playable character? And you said some characters, the supports, are clearly better than others.
Yeah. So like the thing is, like, once you have, I mean, you can change them around obviously, but like Teddy is, because he can learn every buff and every debuff and was doing what you were doing. So I think we did the same thing. It's just that you became Teddy and I became Naoto.
You always do the same,
right?
It's different ways of getting there.
But the buff characters and debuff characters are just essential. Like every other character is kind of replaceable. I could have DPS with me. I could have DPS with Chie. I could have put Yosuke in there if I really wanted to.
Yosuke's the all-rounder that doesn't get used because he's an all-rounder.
Because he's an all-rounder. And that's the issue, is that like the buffers, Teddy especially because he's not an all-rounder, and Kanji because he's so powerful, their auto includes, right? Then you could pick somebody else to heal. But you played Teddy.
No, but even if I hadn't been that, I would have like figured out a different way to still keep Yukiko because of her damage output.
Gotcha. Yeah. But you would have still had to have like that buff character, right?
Yeah, but like Kanji learns a buff move that you can forget. He learns Mataru Kaja. Chie learns a buff move, and Yukiko learns one that I forgot too. So you can just like
have
one turn
spread across.
Yeah. Yeah. It's possible, but like so like one way to not have to do that is to put Teddy in your party.
But like, because that
I
Yosuke...
didn't want to put Teddy in my party because I used Chie and I didn't want to have two ice casters.
Yeah.
But then I stopped using Chie anyway. Yeah.
And so it feels like Yosuke wouldn't get used.
Yosuke's
a bad pick.
Yosuke gets used if you like early in the game and you over level him. There's no reason to take him out because he does get like his stats are all good. They're not great.
Yeah.
But he also gets the Sukukages, which is like he gets the buffs and debuffs for like evasion. And he like for dungeon crawling, he gets stuff that's useful. Like he gets confused and he gets silence. So if you are dungeon crawling and you're not over leveled or have a magical light angel, it helps to have a guy that's like, okay, I can't do enough damage here. If I confuse them, then I get 3 free turns, basically. Right. So he's helpful as in like an ailment hunter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And
that's like a really interesting way to play if you build your party to be like ailment hunters because you can do a lot of damage like that too.
And then you build specifically for them. Yeah. I think you'd have to do stuff like that in order to not use kanji.
Yeah, no. Using kanji is not using kanji is like I would say that's the one character you need to use out of all of them because all of them are replaceable.
Right.
Except for kanji, just because he does so much damage. Like
and the boss fights are slogs.
Yeah.
Like the higher ones, the way this game
he does so much
scales
damage and his
difficulty.
endurance is also the highest. So he tanks.
And so they scale difficulty by like creating more HP and making the rounds go longer, which we can talk about. But because of that, kanji just becomes essential. There are auto picks.
I would agree there, but you say the support characters are better. I wouldn't say this is a support character. I'd say he's so specialized that like you need to use him, which is funny because I kind of see them like when they were putting this together being like, okay, so like kanji's so powerful, but he's so bad at everything else that no one's ever going to use him. People are like, no, still going to use him. But I think it's interesting to think part of making a turn-based RPG is like a lot of it is like balancing mechanics.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is something that we don't necessarily talk about whenever we bring up Pokemon as much because they have a bunch of glitches. But the balancing is usually like spot on. That's why they brought in the fairy type, right? Because dragons needed to be put in check, right? So this, I want to say, strikes a much better balance than P3.
Okay.
So Persona 3 has a couple of issues. One, you can't control your party members. You have to like just give them orders.
Right. Yeah.
But also like a lot of the characters just do the same thing, so there's no reason to mix and match.
Right.
You just have to do it. In this game, at least, like, okay, so do I want to do damage to multiple people or to one person? Chie versus Kanji. Right. Or do I want to buff or do I want to heal? Yukiko versus Teddy. Right. That kind of stuff. And so I don't know. It's just like I felt like there's always a reason to use someone, even Yusuke, who has the ailments. If you're like, okay, so this is a dungeon where people are not weak to the things I have, ailments. Bring in Yosuke. Right. So I don't know. I thought the balance was really well done, despite thinking that the boss fights are like slogs, but that's by design because that's what boss fights are supposed to be in JRPGs. They're supposed to be like 45 minutes long.
In JRPGs.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of a trope of the genre.
Because like if it's not, then that wasn't the real boss fight. Right. And a lot of the boss fights are endurance tests, where it's like, can you survive long enough to get to the phase of you can actually hit this thing while it hits you a bunch.
Right.
Thoughts? Queries? Quips?
Well, I don't know, like, I think some of my comments on the combat are more like for our Ferrothorn.
Okay, we've got to that here in a little bit. So we're almost at the end here. I wanted to talk about, we didn't get to a bunch of stuff that I wrote down, which is okay. Maybe we'll do a bonus episode with all the stuff that we didn't talk about. Like a lot of the symbolism we like didn't talk about last time because we're like, we're going to talk about it this time.
Controversy. Yeah.
We didn't. I did a bunch of research. I have a lot of sources in here. It's okay. So some cool small details that I wanted to bring up, like in general, because John talked about this is a very careful game. Like it doesn't mean like that they don't take risks, because boy do they take risks.
Yeah. Careful
as in like they put thought into everything.
Right.
So I wrote some stuff down here for like small details that I was noticing as I was going. So Nanako's hospital room when she dies and then comes back to life is 404. In Japan, 4 is an unlucky number. That's 13 for them is 4. Because 4 is she, and she, not, so she spelled one way with one character. Another way of spelling she is using the character for death. So death, the word for death is she.
So her room is literally a death room?
Yes.
Ooh.
So there's symbolism there, right? You don't want to be in the 4th floor or in the 4th room or in room 404, right? It'd be similar to Nanako's room being 130. 13-0. That's not. I don't want like that's an unlucky number. Right.
Yeah.
So it's just like the tiniest detail. Like they didn't have to do that.
Man.
Right. Did you guys? You went on the ski trip, right? What happens in the night of the ski trip? The night before the cabin.
I don't know, dreaming it.
What?
I don't know, dreaming it. Tell me.
Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember.
They tell ghost stories.
Yeah. Ghost stories.
And Yosuke ghost stories like this. This is a friend of mine told me this happened a couple years ago, and like they were bullying this girl and they locked her in the gym, and eventually they heard her calling to them, and when they showed up to help, the next day they were found unconscious on the school grounds, and they never found the girl again.
Right.
That is actually how you meet one of the characters in Persona 3.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So the girl who's the ghost and like makes people unconscious, she was being bullied, got locked in the gym, but she didn't disappear. She got sucked into the cognitive dimension. So you go in there to save her, and she becomes the Risei. She becomes the navigator, right? But so essentially, his ghost story is
Persona 3.
Persona 3 is one of the characters of Persona 3, right?
That's cool.
So like a little Easter egg.
Yeah.
I also get a crack or like love how every character texts so differently.
They're
Like,
real careful about the
they're
language.
real careful about like how, and I talked about this in my class with my students, like narrative voice. All these characters have a different voice, and if they all texted the same, you're losing something.
Yeah.
Right. So Risei's texts are full of emojis and full of slang.
Right.
Naoto, did you guys get a text from Naoto?
I don't remember.
I didn't hang out with Naoto.
Texts from Naoto are the best because it's all caps, and there's. I wrote one down here. It's like visit shrine W/me. So like with me?
As
Question
short
mark.
as possible.
Y/N. Please reply. Period.
Beautiful.
That is like the text in Naoto, and then there was just like senpai, heart. Please come with me, and it's like PLZ, like CM, wit me, like question mark, like 3 question marks. So like it's just like a.
Well, it's one of the things that like
really cool
people
detail.
that do like voice acting and like voice character work, like amateur people really miss a lot of the time is that they change like the sound of the voice to an old lady, but they don't change like the vocabulary to shift to match like how an old lady would sound and what they would do or the cadence. And this game does it every time.
Does it every time. Every
Right.
time they go the extra mile to be like, how would this person sound?
Actually
if they said
think,
this?
yeah.
And then so that's why they also feel like people, right? So when the fog envelops the town, that you can like talk to people still. So like when the fog is coming in from that world to this world, it's the fog that makes you like a nihilist, basically.
Yeah.
People start liking it and saying like, man, I'm kind of okay with being at home and not seeing people 2 feet from my face.
Yeah,
you
really,
know, I can avoid people in that.
I had some real COVID flashbacks.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting situation where it's like the best way to describe it is like we're the frog in the boiling pot.
Right.
And the water's rising so slowly that we can't feel it, and that's the fog is coming in. Now we're like, at first they were like, this is poison, but then I'm like, you know what? I kind of like it. I don't have as much energy. I don't have to do as much. It's great. And you're like, man, we need to stop
We gotta
this.
get out of this.
It's that meme of the dog sitting there with a cup of coffee while the house is on fire.
Yeah.
This is fine.
Yeah, this is fine. And they're like, I'm okay with this.
Evidently,
now.
I spent my last 3 months being like,
Yeah.
yep,
I'm
see
okay
you
with
all
this.
later.
Yeah.
Goodness.
There's a lot of reference. There's a big reference to cultivation theory, where at one point, Chie and Yukiko are discussing like why the TV, and they're talking about like so cultivation theory is the idea that we cultivate an idea of the world based on how much TV we watch, and it's been quote unquote disproven a few times, but like it's still like a philosophical exercise, right? So they're like, why was this world TV? And Yukiko's like, maybe it's because we've been trained to watch TV ever since we were kids, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yukiko, you can't just say
TV represents the collective unconscious.
Yeah, you can't just say stuff like that. So I thought it was really interesting. Brandon brought up that like the Sayoko, the nurse, her persona is the devil, or her arcana is the devil because she's like horrible, right?
Yeah,
there's a whole story there we won't get into today, and they always do this. So like in Persona 5, the devil is a journalist who like is super like nosy and like wants to get stories and everything. And you set her up with one of your friends so that she stops asking you questions but asks him, and he says like, she's the devil, and it's like, I see what you're doing.
There it is.
But all the arcana are subtly or not connected to their characters. So Adachi is the jester, which is an alternative version of the fool, who's you. You as in like
the mirror of
why
the fool.
you, and also you, the main character, right? So it's the mirror there because so the difference is the fool is naive and doesn't know what's going on in the world but wants to find out, and the jester isn't, but is forced to act like an idiot.
Right.
So there's a difference. right? That's why the full Arcana is the right version and the Jester is not. These come from different tarot decks.
Right.
And then it becomes the Hunger, which is Lust in Japanese, which is an alternative version of the Strength Arcana. And the Strength Arcana is power, represents power, right? The Lust Arcana represents sheer joy in having power, which is what Adachi is. He's just like, I have power and I love it. And the Strength Arcana is like, we have power and we're noble about it. The Lust Arcana is not. So all the Arcanas have like representations like that.
For that, I was really surprised that the final stage of the Judgment Arcana is Lucifer.
Yes.
I expected that to be the final step of the Devil Arcana.
Yeah,
which was really interesting.
There's an interesting relationship with, like, from what I understand, like, Japanese culture and Lucifer.
Yeah.
I think this is gonna sound weird, but I think there's a little more understanding in that culture's understanding of Catholicism.
Right.
That Lucifer is like a tragic figure, not a betrayer.
But even if you take him as a betrayer figure, or like a tragic figure, right, and you go like the Paradise Lost route, where we kind of sympathize with him, he's still not a judgment entity. He's the judged. He's not. It's weird because like the step right before him is Michael.
Maybe that's why they did it,
right?
Because he's like not. He's was the most judged person thing ever.
And then he gets to It was an interesting moment where I was like, huh. I kind of expected like God to be that person.
Yeah, no, they can't do that. They can't do that.
It'd be interesting.
But in Persona 5, there's Maria as a persona.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So it's just a lot of cool little details. We don't have that much left, so let's get into our Roselia, Ferrothorn, and Badu here. So I'll start because this was a purposeful segue I did. So my Roselia is attention to detail.
Yep.
All the tiny things that happen. And then the character development. Just these people feel like people.
They feel like people.
They develop as you talk to them, or if you don't, they also develop, right? It's just like you don't see it happen.
Yeah, my Roselia is the same. It's just the characterization is beautiful.
It's beautiful. And there's one character, Yumi, who's the drama club person who, like, at the end I feel like her arc is kind of strange. Like, her dad dies midway and it's a whole thing.
Yep.
But at the end, every other character is like, I can't wait to see you again because you changed my life. And she says to you, like, I can't wait to keep growing. And you're like, wow, you are the one person who realized that, like, you can live without me kind of thing. I thought was interesting. My Ferrothorn was the mechanic of investigation by talking to people on random days. That is
the worst.
Dear listener, for you to unlock a dungeon sometimes, you have to, like, talk to people in town to figure out more about the person, which doesn't make any sense, right? And when you do this, you have to, like, for Naoto's, you have to, like, takes like 3 days, you have to, like, find 3 different cops, talk to everyone in town, and then, like, after you talk to everyone in town, a new cop shows up, you talk to him, then you have to talk to everyone again, and the game is just like, maybe there's some people you haven't talked to. I was like, I talked to everyone. Please just let me
Move on with this.
Yeah, so didn't make any sense. It required you to talk to everyone like 3 times once, and I was like, please don't. My Badu, and this is knowing all the things that they do in Persona 5, which you don't really think about, and we talked about this, how, like, you can switch party members mid-dungeon instead of having to go back and all this kind of stuff, right? It's kind of like the Apple Steve Jobs, like, you don't know what you want until I show you the iPad and you're like, oh wait, I do want this.
That was great.
Right? So what I want is a reverse social link mechanic, or social link deterioration mechanic. So there is a reverse social link mechanic. It happens with Ai. If you say the wrong thing, it reverses, and she hates you for a bit.
I love it.
Right? And you have to, like, work with her to bring it back. What I want, though, I want that to be more of a thing. So, like, if you say the wrong thing, they get mad at you. Right? But what I want to happen is, like, because I maxed out Marie in, like, June, basically, or July. And then I didn't talk to her for 4 months.
Have some reason to.
And I want it to be, like, depending on your rank, because you have, like, so the little music notes you get whenever you get a higher rank, right? I want it to be, like, so if you get to from rank 3 to rank 4, you need 15 music notes.
Yep.
I'm on rank 4, I have the 15 music notes. Once I do that, every, like, 4 days, I lose. Every 4 times I don't hang out with her, I lose a music note.
That'd be great.
So I have to hang out with her again to get to the point of ranking up. So there's a deterioration where, like, if I don't spend 4 months with you, we're not the best friends in the world anymore because, like, I haven't seen you in 4 months, right? And I don't want it to be extreme, like, you don't hang out for 2 days, lose all your progress. But I want it to be, like, subtle, where, like, so if you're level 9, then it takes 9 hangouts to lose a point, right? But I want it to be like you still have to talk to these people even though you maxed them out.
I think another way that you could do that to be, like, incentivize it instead of de-incentivizing it is, like, if once you've maxed out somebody's social rank and you had other people that aren't going to have like scenes, you're just like hanging out that day to get more music notes, if you choose to hang out with them again, they do a buddy hangout.
That happens sometimes.
It does happen sometimes, but it'd be nice if like that was the set mechanic.
Yeah.
That like after you're romantic with somebody, you do buddy hangouts.
Yeah.
So that like you could still hang out with them every day like you would in real life.
Yeah.
And then we just start wrapping other people into a
Yeah, that
social
would be
circle.
cool as well. They do some stuff like that, and they also do like you can't invite them out to like go to the hot springs or something like that.
Right.
But I think to me it's more realistic. Like if I don't talk to you for 4 months, I can't just talk to you as if we talked yesterday. Especially if you're in high school, you see them every day, but I don't talk to you for 4 months.
Can we also talk about how wild it is in this game that like you will be too nervous to tell somebody that you love them or that to further the relationship, but at like rank 3 you're like, do you want to go to a hot spring, just me and you, hop on my bike and
Sounds
let's
great.
go.
Let's go, baby.
Yeah.
Some
No, I
weird
love that.
dynamics there.
Or like you need full courage to like ask Naoto out the first time, but I'm like, okay, I've already saved her life. And I'm like best friends with Yukiko.
And I'm also like best friends with the Japanese idol.
Right.
Like-
I'm like real good friends and like flirt all the time with
Why do you make me this nervous?
Yeah.
And like she is my girlfriend and we're like, you know, full maxed out.
Paired. Yeah.
So why am I too nervous to talk to this girl?
Yeah.
Like that didn't.
It's weird, but what I want is like, so those points that get accrued, you lose them a little bit as you like don't hang out with them, and eventually you
Right.
have to like remax it out or something. It doesn't mean you get the scene again. It just means like, because you know there's like those ranking up hangouts. You have to do a couple more of those.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which make your life harder, but I think more realistic.
Yeah, I like that.
My score for this game is 9 out of 10. I think it's amazing. It's not a 10 because Persona 5 is a 10, and I can't give it also a 10. But it's amazing. Brandon, what do you got?
Yeah, so I definitely agree a lot with what Phil said. I will also go Rose. Love the social.
Roselia?
links. Yes.
Roselia.
I was just shortening it. Fine. Roselia. I love the social links, and it's a really rewarding system. And then going down into Badu, I'm gonna skip over Ferrothorn for a second. I'm coming back to it. Badu, yes, just like Phil, I would like to see the social links grow and be used slightly differently. I do like the idea of not even necessarily an attrition mechanic, but either like something to incentivize or just not de-incentivize still spending time with people with whom you have a full social link. Because what the game will do is it'll say, yeah, you feel like you couldn't be any closer to this person. You still want to hang out with them?
Yeah, the game
Right, and
gaslights
like-
you all the time.
It's like de-incentivizing
Yeah, it
you.
does.
It's like, okay, but she and I are a couple. I should still be spending time with her, and I would roleplay that. I would still spend time with Chie.
So people say like in New Game Pluses they go like I already did everything, now I'm only hanging out with the person I care about, basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I do wish there was something there to note how that's not really how human relationships work. And I do wish there was a bit more of a penalty for saying the wrong thing sometimes, because sometimes I felt like I could kind of just get away with stuff.
Yeah, you don't get the points, but they're like, all right, see you tomorrow. But you're like, you're stupid and I hate your face. We're like, well, okay, see you tomorrow. You're like, no, that should really.
I tried real hard with
Yes.
the
the worst.
Exactly. And that goes back to what we were saying, where earlier I said, like, this isn't one of those games where it's like, hey, you want to be friends? Like, no, you're stupid, go away. Oh, haha, don't be like that. Like, they don't do that. They do actually sort of do that, I've now realized.
They do that a little. They give
little
you
bit.
answers that are like that, but
Yes.
I do feel bad.
And so I do wish they had. So I think the social links are great. They could be better. Ferrothorn. And this, if you know me, and John will certainly be surprised, or he would be if I hadn't already told him, but combat. I am normally the player who everything else is just wasting my time until I get back to the combat. And this is like the one game where that's not the case. The combat is wasting my time to get back to the social links because I just did not enjoy the dungeons of this game. The procedural generation is a huge pain in the ass.
you should see Marie's dungeon.
Oh, you describing that makes me never want to even go for the
No,
true
it's-
ending because
yeah,
that just
it's-
doesn't sound
Wow.
fun in any sort of way, period. And that's the thing, is like a lot of the combat, a lot of the challenge just isn't fun. Like, I remember I randomly ran into this shadow that was like a giant Gundam that was harder than most of the bosses because my characters would not hit it. And the thing is, you're going to say, well, but you guys play Pokemon, right? Well, I think Double Team and Minimize are stupid in those games, too.
Oh, I love Minimize
to be
so
clear.
much. Minimize, toxic.
I think it's a cheap strategy. You just use Protect instead. All right? Protect and substitute spam. And so when Kanji learned that, like, debuff mechanic of, like, lowering the enemy. Yeah, when he learned that, I had to use it because otherwise the game was just way too much of a slog.
The little hand demons would always like buff each other and all
right.
that. Yeah.
And it's like when your characters are just constantly missing, it's not fun. All right,
it's not.
It is like to go to Dungeons and Dragons. There's monsters have two stats, right? They have their armor class, which is how hard they are to hit, and they have their HP. It is much better to have lower armor class and higher HP than the inverse. Because it's more fun to be hitting something and just not, like, taking it out in 3 hits than it is to miss it 17 times in a row.
But even then, ultimately, so Pokemon gets boiled down, and this is a reductionist thing, but people say a lot of times that Pokemon is really just a big game of rock, paper, scissors, right? You're trying to determine what weaknesses are, you're trying to get that weakness while there. And this game is too, right? It's trying to determine rock, paper, scissors. The issue that I think Pokemon doesn't have, that this game has in the combat, is that in Pokemon, combat is fast, especially optimized high-level combat. It's lasting like a round or two, and it feels like a game of rock, paper, scissors. This game still feels like rock, paper, scissors, but if somebody's like, in order to beat this, you gotta play rock, paper, scissors 400 times.
Yeah.
You know how you're gonna win, you know what the outcomes are gonna happen, you just gotta keep swinging that fist.
Right, and it's a slog, right? And the dungeons are a slog, and especially when you gotta backtrack several levels through the procedurally generated RNG dungeon.
Yeah. Once you find the key card.
I kid you, I think that's the closest I came to rage quit. I think Kubo's dungeon, where that's the gamey one, right?
Yeah,
where
I think Naoto's the one you have to go back 2 levels.
Yes. Yeah. There are these T sections in Kubo's dungeon that if you like cross them, it reorients your camera and teleports you.
Yeah.
If you're like me and you genetically inherited really bad inner ears, and so you have a terrible sense of direction, that is hell.
Yeah, I didn't like that, but I did like that dungeon.
I finally figured out, though, that if you, like, stick to the... I think it's a glitch. I don't think it's supposed to do this. If you stick to the side, you can go through those and not trigger the teleport.
Oh, that is a glitch, I think.
Yeah, but that also increased my quality of life so much, because I went from about to just be like, I'm done with this game. Like, I'm not doing this dungeon anymore because I literally cannot reorient myself. I don't have the sense of direction to do it. To, like... okay, I can get through this, but when I hit this man-child, I'm going to, like, take out all my frustrations on him.
You did.
And I did. Right? And so, like, the dungeons are painful. Please just pre-render them. If we have to backtrack, give us a map. Make these things navigable. Make the bosses and enemies, like, set, and we can see them on the map. And we
Persona 5 fixes pretty much everything you just said. The combat is way faster, and even sometimes when it's not, it feels faster because of how stylish it is.
Nice.
And there's more lines in combat. It looks better. Like the dungeons are like they're called palaces, and they are like set, and you find maps.
Oh, that sounds
and all this kind of stuff, and it's all thematic. And Persona 5 fixes pretty much everything. Some of the battles are still a little slow, but it feels faster because of how they are designed.
Yeah, that sounds utterly fantastic. And I want to be clear. It's not that boss fights need to last 3 rounds, anything more, and it's bad. That would be a very narrow view of things. But, and John and I were actually talking about this last night, that's where, like, boss stages would be great.
Yeah.
Where, like, after you've done, 3,000 damage, preferably a little less, something like you feel like you've progressed because you moved to a different part. Of the fight. Like, you knocked off the enemy's armor at this point. Now their attack patterns and tactics, like, totally change, and so you have to adjust to that as well. That would definitely be better than...
They do that a little, not as much as you're saying. Like, they do, if you've done enough damage, then they start using, like, almighty spells and, like, insta-kills and stuff, but it's not the same as, like, their attack... Like, they change as in, like, now they hit harder, but their defense is lower. It's just, like... Or the other way around, right? It's just, like... now they have access to a more powerful skill.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I would like to see visual changes along with that. It's like, okay, well, you broke my shield, so now I'm just going all offense.
At some point, I really want you guys to play through a complete run through of Kirby 64 because Kirby 64 is an amazing game and it has, I think, one of the most perfect final boss fights.
Interesting.
It's really a great one.
That reminds me. I only encountered this at the final boss, Izanami. It's the only time it happened. It is a terrible design choice. Get rid of this immediately. If you, that is the main character, go down, that ends the fight.
Oh, that ends everything.
That ends every fight.
Fair.
Yeah. Well, that's the only time I ever went down.
Yeah.
That is terrible design because if that's the case, the other three shouldn't be there. Because there's a reason why I gave everyone healing items.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, man. You're the leader.
Exactly.
You cut the head of the snake.
That's terrible design. That is not... No.
That happens in Persona 5, too. That's why you should always don't care about anyone else. Let them die. Heal yourself.
Heal yourself.
Yeah, no. Terrible design. If you have a team of 4, that means that all 4 of them matter. And if one of them is still up, you're still in the fight, right? Like, if I've got a team of 6 Pokemon, when my starter goes down, that doesn't make the other 5 suddenly pointless.
Should.
No, it shouldn't.
Give us a rating. Give us a rating. What's the game?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I know what to do with thematically, like, you're the leader, so you die, but I think that, like, you should get one turn to, like,
Bring him back.
Yeah.
At the very least, really, you should just be able to keep fighting with him with his ass, like, unconscious on the ground. Same you can with any other character.
You give them orders. Anyway, yeah. What's your score?
Score.
8 out of 10. Very good. I would like to see some things done differently, but ultimately, solid game, and I really enjoyed it.
Some of the things you said have already been fixed for Persona 5, which I highly recommend playing. John.
So, mine are probably going to be obvious. I already said Rosalia is the characters just like Phil. Ferrothorn for me is very much the arcane dialogue options.
Yes.
Right? Ask me why I think that.
Why do you think that?
Well, it's about the arcane dialogue options. Ask me why I think that.
Why do you think that?
Well, it's about the arcane dialogue options. Ask me why I think that.
Why do you think that?
Oh, well, actually,
Hey, man, you should have just picked the right 6 things. That's not easy to say. Okay, not easy to do. Just get 6 for 6. That's easy.
Nonsense. Nonsense. That's the Ferrothorn. Just get rid of that shit. The Budu, the thing that I think they could work on, I'm going to change it a little bit here, is that I think that they really could work on plot. And so I think this game does a very good job at micro-plot. Mm-hmm. At, like, these relationships and these social ranks and these, like, individual character stories. But because they're trying to do all of them at the same time, that macro plot was pretty messy. And it led to some of that Adachi villain complaints that we had earlier. Sure. And it led to the game, because it had to have, like, 4 different endings, it felt disjointed because they wanted to. And I think they could... When I'm comparing this game to a game like The Witcher 3, which has a very nice macro plot, and still has multiple choices and multiple endings, I think it's a better version of that. And so I think they could work on, like, their macro plot writing to make it cleaner.
Yeah, I think Persona 3 and 5 do a better job with the macro plot. The usual discussion in, like, forums about this is that Persona 4 does the best at making it personable. So, like, you feel like the characters are your friends. Yes. I live in this town. In Persona 5, it's more like you feel like you're actually making a difference in society, but your friends are more of a team that gets together because you have the same powers, not that you're best friends.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily agree with, but I see the point. Persona 3 is the same thing. It's like, you live in your dorms, but you don't feel like you're all friends. You feel like you're all, like, people who have the same powers.
Yeah.
And you get together to beat a bigger macro plot. So they haven't found that balance yet, because I think 4 does the best of making it like, we are all friends who are in this together, right?
Yeah.
And Persona 5 is like, we're a team, not necessarily we're all best friends.
Right. Well, and it comes back to, like, I could care less about this the macro story. Kind of what Brandon's saying, like, the macro story for me kind of felt like the battles felt for Brandon. Like, we'll find out who the killer. We'll go around town and ask people what they think about who the killer might be, so that I can spend another day hanging out with Yosuke. Right? And, like, I think we need to be invested in both. So, and that's a Budu, because I think they're good, but they're not great. I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10.
I think you have a fog in front of you right now.
Because this game, I think, these problems with this game aren't just, like, inconveniences. A lot of the time, they're game breaking.
That is true.
Like Brandon said, if you play this without a guide on the internet,
I
get that bad ending.
I would say game breaking, because they're not, like, glitching the game out. but they're experience breaking.
Experience breaking.
Yeah,
sure,
That's a
yeah.
much better term.
Yeah.
They're experience breaking issues. Whereas like when we go back to like Hades, right? Maybe if we didn't like the fact we had to run through 400 times before we got a certain dialogue, that wasn't experience breaking. It just sort of extended it a little bit. In this one, if you choose the wrong dialogue option, it ends and you feel like a failure. Right?
That's what they
Yeah.
want you to feel, though.
I know, and I did, and it was fine. But I think because that is hidden behind not me making the wrong choices, but me making arcane choices. I'm a
It is
hammer
the
a little
wrong
harder.
choice, but I agree that it should be like 1 or 2 dialogue choices, not like you have to say it six
You're
times
right.
feels excessive.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I would
Or
agree with
even like when you go home. Do you want to go home?
Yeah, no,
No,
that's
I don't want to go home. Are you sure? Because it's weird that you're just hanging out here. You going to go to Junis? Why the hell are you going to Junis? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the game just gaslights you. So I think that's like part of. So I think that's an overcorrection for Persona 3 because Persona 3 was like, they ask you like, do you want to save the world or do you want to let the world end and people be happy until it ends? You're like, well, I think I should save the
I think I
world.
should save the world.
And people are like, hey, that's not really much of a choice. And in Persona 4, they were like, oh, you didn't think that was a choice? Well, here's a choice for you.
It's like, okay.
Okay, yeah.
So
So
if
I think
I-
they overcorrected.
Yeah, if I was
Yeah.
writing a macro plot, I would have had the divisions not all occur at one point, but occur
Yeah.
at several points throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have had those divisions always end up with death of everybody, right? Like if you do The Witcher 3, there are options where like Ciri goes on to be a Witcher
even
with
the
you.
normal ending is bad.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like I think you could have split it off
Even the
and
good
treated
ending
more
is
places.
arguably bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To get the
yeah,
whole
I agree.
persona.
But yeah, so it's just like closing remarks here. So we all enjoyed the game.
We did. It was a
Some
great
mechanics still seem dated, even though it's like a golden the remaster version, like quotations with like all the different difficulties. I would say the official Professor's Play recommendation is play this,
Play it.
Yeah.
especially if you have the time to sink into something new and like get into characters
If you love
like-
anime,
and narratives. Yeah,
it feels like you're in an anime.
Yeah.
It feels like you're a character.
and
there.
you know it, and it still works.
It's still fun.
Yeah. It's like a really like high and low stakes story because like you hang out with Yosuke and he's like, I gotta help these people part time, but then the next thing you do is like kill God. So it's like they have this like high and
Yeah.
low stakes thing, right? I play this even if you don't like turn based or if the combat is a little slow because it works.
Mhm.
But if you're worried about the combat or the graphics, start with Persona 5. You don't have to have any knowledge about this game to play Persona 5. Combat is much faster. The graphics are sleek as hell.
Nice.
So
Brandon
try-
should have played Persona 5.
Everyone should always play Persona 5. All the time. Always. But yeah, that's it. It's time to shove Persona 4 Golden into the back of our psyche, into that TV.
Into nostalgia.
Yeah. JK, I remember playing this fondly, nostalgia. But we're done with it, and for the first time, I will not be saying I'll see you in a couple weeks because this is our last episode for the first season, right? So I want to take a minute to thank my fellow professor John and Brendan, as well as our guest Amelia, who will watch this later, I'm sure. But you, of course, I wanted to thank my girlfriend for her support and for the views, because I bounce ideas off
That's
her
the
all the
best.
time, and the views. And all the viewers, right? So you all out there, I hope you enjoy getting some deeper insight into games while still hearing us get all giddy about the game itself, or
You
get all
are the
angry
best.
about the game itself,
And a little bit of both.
and a little bit of both. We'll keep going after the summer break. 10 years Professors Play forever.
Professor's Play the next.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it.
But yeah, we'll be back after the summer break, so around August with our first episode in series, right, of season 2. Until then, I'm Professor Phil Chavot. He's Professor Brendan West. He's Professor John Adams, and for the final time this season, we are professors who play video games. See y'all in a couple of months.
See you in December.